When did you score by a 1 in a million stroke of luck? I was at a large outdoor concert and some guy walked up and said, "No way, it's you, man." He then hands me my driver's license that I didn't even know I'd lost somehow. Got hit by a speeding car when crossing a road, cracked the windscreen, did a flip and landed on the pavement nearby. Paramedics were worried I'd broken my neck. Several hours and x-rays later, I walked out with nothing but minor bruising on my back. Different angle and I could easily have died. My score was not getting crushed or drowned in a farm accident. I was 16 and working in the packing house on a blueberry farm. I went out to the fields with a guy to pick up the berries. The truck didn't have a cab, just a windshield. I was sitting on a fuel tank where the passenger seat would normally be. There was a large ditch full of water on the right side of the road. The driver went off the road into the ditch. I went into the water and the truck rolled over and came down on top of me. Somehow I wasn't pinned or crushed and was able to find my way out. I used up a lifetime's worth of luck in that one incident. I was in a horrible rollover accident with my family after graduating high school. We were in a Suburban traveling on the freeway when someone fishtailed us and we spun into the median and then started rolling. I somehow slid out of my seatbelt and flew out the passenger window, landing in front of the Suburban. When it got to where I landed, it bounced over me and then continued to roll. Eyewitnesses said that it was the only time the Suburban ever left the ground. In the aftermath, myself, my girlfriend at the time, and my sister all needed to be intubated as our ribs had punctured our lungs and we were drowning in our own blood. There happened to be 3 separate, unrelated EMTs behind us that all pulled over and had medical equipment in their vehicles and intubated us until ambulances and Starflight showed up. So I'd say the bounce and the random EMTs behind us would be the best luck I've ever had. I won a $20,000 car with a $10 raffle ticket. A new casino opened up near me, so my girlfriend and I decided to go at 3 a.m. on a whim. She won $700 on a slot machine and then I won $600 on a machine and we then proceeded to leave. Bought an ice cream and won a free one and I redeemed the free one which contained another free one. My car broke down on a 2-lane highway in the middle of the Appalachians, 20 miles from the closest city and with no cell reception. The first vehicle around the bend was my grandfather who lived 3 hours away. He just randomly decided to go on a weekend trip to the mountains. From breakdown to being picked up was less than 5 minutes. So Appalachia is a 500,000 square kilometer area, and Appalachia doesn't even include the entire area of the Appalachian Mountains themselves. So the odds of this, for anyone wondering, were quite astronomical, only slightly offset by the fact that there are limited highways. I'd say the odds of your grandpa being that close to you took the total probability of the incident back into the millions again. I lost my college ID card. A replacement was $15, I'd found out. I walked out to the rainy parking lot determined to get through the rest of my college career without an ID card, when I saw a folded, soggy green square on the ground. It was actually a folded $10 and $5 bills. $15. I went directly to Chipotle. I lost my phone while we were laying pipe at work, filled in the trench and then realized I'd lost it somewhere in the 60 foot of trench we had dug. Left it there overnight, seeing as it was already dark and I couldn't hear it when I called it. Returned the next day with listening equipment. Took an extremely lucky guess on where it was and located it within 30 minutes. Dug 2.5 feet down to find that the only damage was a small crack on my screen protector and a scuff on my OtterBox. Everyone, including me, had written it off as never being recovered. 2 hours of my time when I figured it would take me a week to find it. When I was 5 or 6, my grandpa took me to the horse track a lot. One time, he let me pick the 3 horses I thought would win first, second, and third. Needless to say, he won a trifecta. I don't remember the amount he won, but I remember him lifting me up and kissing my cheeks over and over. I miss him every day. I was around 8 and was at a community center to see a play. After the play, they were hosting a raffle, so I got my grandparents to buy me a few tickets. Now, the weird part. I won every prize. Every single one of them. I had only a handful of tickets, and there were 100+ people in the room participating. I ended up giving some of the presents back to the raffle people because it wouldn't be fair for me to get all of them. And can you imagine a young girl and her grandparents having to carry all of these prizes out? It was unrealistic. Prizes were a giant stuffed bear, wine, bath stuff, more bath stuff, and some chocolates. On Friday, my father-in-law was purging and offered my husband a pair of jeans because they were his size. The second I saw them, I was like, frick. 24 hours later, I sold them for almost $20,000. 1933 mint condition Levi's 501s. Thanks to the Redditors over at Raw Denim for their advice. My husband washed them. I've seen Antiques Roadshow enough that I freaked out when he told me that. According to a guy who wanted to buy them, that took $2,000 off the value, though the winning bidder didn't even ask, so that's not really true. I won a PS4 from Taco Bell. Twice! I've eaten at Taco Bell once per contest since I won the first time. The first time was a launch bundle I won off of a box code I got when coworkers dragged me for lunch. The second was the White Destiny bundle I won with the free code they bury in the rules. I gave that one to a friend so I had someone to play Destiny with. I fell on ice. Traumatic brain injury. Died 3 times. They told my wife I wasn't going to make it. Coma for 3 days. Still not dead. The second luckiest was when my wife agreed to marry me 30 years ago. Similar odds of her saying yes, I think. I found a $20 bill at the post office. Since I thought it was my lucky day, I bought a $10 scratch-off lotto ticket and won $150. As a young, dumb teenager, I was free soloing, which is climbing alone, on a small mountain without a safety harness. I was about 20 meters or 65 feet off the ground when I reached what I thought was the top. Turns out the top was still going upwards, and the surface was smooth as a baby's backside, with nothing to grab onto. I tried to descend, but got myself stuck. After a few minutes, I just couldn't hold on any longer. I lost my grip and I fell. I dropped 5 meters, 16 feet, and by chance 2 tiny trees, growing out from a crack in the mountain face, caught me. And they did so perfectly, one under my arm and the other right under one of my knees. From there, I found my way down again, safe and sound. If it hadn't been for those trees, I could have been seriously injured or dead, as the ground underneath was littered with pointy rocks. I didn't use my luck to win the lottery, but it saved me from a really bad situation. Fact is, safety is alpha omega when it comes to climbing, and especially when doing free soloing. This event happened because I was reckless. I climbed a route I hadn't scaled previously, and I did so without a rope or spotter. So, my words to anyone climbing or free soloing out there are please take safety measures and stay safe. Learn from my mistakes. I was incredibly lucky to get away from this incident unharmed. Those trees gave me a second chance. I survived bacterial meningitis when I was 2. Everyone who gets it usually has to have limbs removed. But I ended up being part of a new medication trial and it saved my life, and the only thing I've lost to this day as a result is a little bit of hair at the back of my head. That med never came into circulation after that, so it was my only chance to get it, and I did. I would consider that very lucky. My mother gave me a very nice necklace. One morning I went to scratch my neck and didn't feel it. I guess I didn't put the latch on properly and it fell off, so I got super bummed out because it was really nice. A few hours later, I found it in my shoe. It fell down my shirt, down my pants without a belt, and into my left shoe, which had been tightly laced. That, I believe, is life having what the kids call a trick shot. Well done, almighty powers that be. You have 6 skills and 360 no-scoped that necklace like a pro. Sorry, everyone, I'm having a crisis of age here and I'm trying to be what the kids call lit. I got hit by a semi-truck while driving 75 miles per hour down the highway. I rolled 6 or so times and landed right side up in the ditch without so much as a scratch on mine, my fiance's, or my friend in the back seat's body. My 2014 Chevy Sonic was done though. I'm amazed such a tiny car kept me safe through that. I also won a $1,500 jackpot on a slot machine once. I used to occasionally go to late-night casinos with a mate who was pretty big on gambling and women who took their clothes off for money. I don't do that second thing. I always play low-bet value roulette, which is a hard limit I set before I go in, usually 20 to 40 pounds. Nothing went my way and I was cleaned out before 5 minutes had passed, barring one last 50p chip. I put it square on one number, which came in. Then I won again and again. I don't remember much more, but I do remember walking into the kitchen the next day to find nearly £4,000 on my counterpoint, most of it still in the foil envelopes the casino gets it supplied in. When I was 12, I was walking through the woods and got hit in the face with an arrow by someone who wasn't paying attention to where he was firing. While this may not be lucky in itself, it hit the hinge of my jawbone. Half an inch in any other direction would have been much more fatal, an inch up would have gone into my brain, and an inch down into my throat. I was holding stock in Delta Airlines back in the late 90s. I was going to hold it for the long term, but it skyrocketed and I made so much that I decided to sell my shares. But then it went up even more and I regretted that. Then I found out that when I tried to sell my shares, I actually doubled my investment. Good day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At a fancy charity ball, I bought 5 raffle tickets for $100. I put each ticket in a different bucket for different items. I won the Chanel purse worth $1,500. Then I also won the David Yurman diamond bracelet and ring worth $2,000. The same year I got ticketed and towed for parking in my usual spot at work because on November 1st the parking rules changed for snow. I didn't know that. That cost me all afternoon and $400. That night, my friends and I went to play bingo with the old biddies at church, and I hit the jackpot bingo, which was worth exactly $400. I forgot I had a midterm and missed the exam. Somehow ended up with a B on said midterm. I once had a C+ going into an exam, got a C- on the final, and somehow ended up with an A in the class? I didn't question anything. When I was in the second year of my unfinanced PhD, I met a Brazilian girl who was in France for her PhD. We met in a bar. Our PhDs had nothing to do with it. We dated for 2 years before she had to go back to Brazil in order to finish her PhD. I was crushed. Boom! My PhD advisor had just started an international project in Brazil. In her region. She sent me there to work, all paid for by the project. Now we've finished our PhDs, we're back in France, and she'll be my wife in 2 months. Update, she's now my wife and we're a very happy couple. We had a wonderful wedding that we'll never forget. Much of her Brazilian family made it to France to celebrate with us, which was a blessing. We then took our close family to Paris and helped them experience French culture and cuisine. We cried a lot when they left, but it was a crazy 2 weeks. We're going to Brazil for a month at the end of this year. Can't wait. I found a $165 voucher in a slot machine in Atlantic City in the morning I was leaving. Turned that into $2,500 on the roulette table while waiting for my friends. This was a wild string of events that I still can't believe. I got a job in the video game testing industry. I got placed on a specific project that happened to have a point of contact that knew my favorite band personally. When the client came to visit, this point of contact mentioned my favorite band and my boss mentioned that I loved them. I was then invited to fly out and hang out with my favorite band. I got a tour of their headquarters and got to spend a bunch of time with them for the weekend. The only thing I had to pay for was my flight. It was easily the best weekend of my life, and I'm now on first-name basis and the VIP list with that band. The band was Guar, and I'm under NDA, so I can't disclose the game or company I work for. Sorry. In elementary school, we had a festival full of games and prizes. None of the games were really that interesting, stupid crap like Limbo and Bingo, but one game had my attention, the Cakewalk, a game with the promising reward of cavities. Yes, I won, 10 times in a row. The lucky part was they kicked me out after going home with a huge stack of 10 cakes, not a stack of 2 or 3. My trackpad on my MacBook broke. The Apple Store called me a day later saying after they fixed it, someone knocked my computer off the table and shattered the whole frame, and it can't be fixed. I got a brand new Retina display MacBook for free. They were able to transfer everything off my old computer to the new one as well. And the new computer didn't have a place for a DVD like my old one did, so they even gave me a brand new external DVD drive. I applied for a job that was way out of my league, and the pay was more than twice what I was making at the time. It included pension, full benefits, and all the good stuff. I showed up quite early for the interview, had some time to kill, so I sat in the lobby reading some industry magazines. One article was about the top 10 threats to the industry, which I made a point of reading and soaking in as much as I could. Eventually, I got called into the interview, and everything was going okay for the most part. This industry and the role are both new to me, and I think it may have shown during the interview as a weak spot. But then I got asked, "What do you see as potential issues with our industry and business?" I was so excited I almost jumped out of my seat. I went off in great detail about everything I'd just learned. The interviewers were very impressed, and little did they know that had I been asked that exact same question just 30 minutes earlier, I would have had nearly nothing to say. I got the job. I'm still there, close to 10 years now, and doing well. Several promotions and I've made a name for myself and frequently get job offers from other companies looking for someone with my experience and skill set, both in demand and with low supply available. I'm very happy with what I have and don't plan on leaving anytime soon. 1 a.m. Taco Bell, ordered a Dorito taco and a Crunch Wrap. I ate both, but my body wanted more. I jokingly reached into the bag, telling my girlfriend there was always a fry at the bottom, and there was a frickin' cheesy gordita crunch in the bag. I checked the receipt and was only charged for the two things, so that was awesome. I used to work at Taco Bell. If I accidentally made an extra taco or something, I always just threw it in the bag. It's too much of a hassle to deal with it. I did one time make something with lettuce when I was supposed to not have lettuce, so I remade it and asked the guy if he wanted the other one we made free of charge. He says, "No, I don't like lettuce," in a snarky way. Like, fine, screw you too, as if the lettuce is gonna frickin' kill you. It's free food. Just goes to show that some Americans would rather turn away an extra portion of food and make enemies than go anywhere near a vegetable. Pick the damn lettuce out if you don't like it, you moron. I worked at a retail store for luggage where it was base pay plus commission. The other two salespeople were lazy as F. They made almost no sales, didn't interact with customers, and basically leaned against the counter sipping coffee and being fake friends with the manager lady. My first week there, I made more commission than they did in an average month. The manager lady was a super witch, kept cutting my hours, said I was making her look bad by making so many sales, and gave me all the crap jobs like taking out the trash every gosh darn day because I was the only male and stronger, she said. Things like cleaning the bathrooms twice a day, cutting into my sales, reassigning my sales to other people so it looked more even. I lasted 3 months before the fake friends talked enough crap about me stealing their sales that the manager fired me. 3 months later, I'm working with a company that's flipping houses. We get a call from a landlord about a house they wanted to sell because the tenants weren't paying, and being a landlord was more of a pain in the butt than he thought. When we get there, guess who was the tenant? Yeah, the witch manager that fired me. I straight up bought her house for cash and evicted her. I once threw an apple out of a car window at a traffic cone and knocked it over when I was 10. I went to war and didn't die. Same. I got blown up in Afghanistan, had 13 pieces of shrapnel hit me in the front plate of my IOTV. When I went home on R&R, I bought a lotto ticket. Won $100. Haven't had a single bit of luck since then, though. I rolled 2 natural 20s in a row in an important combat during a game of D&D. Unfortunately, I ended up using all of my party's luck, and a character died the next session due to bad RNG. RNGesus giveth, RNGesus taketh away. I'm a healthy white American male. I'm a healthy white Australian male. Got your one up there on luck, mate? Never having owned a stock before, on gut instinct I bought 186 shares of Apple in 1998. I came out of university and didn't have a job. I was applying and applying for jobs in video editing and media, however I hardly got any interviews. About 4 months of having no job later, I went to my final interview and said to myself that if I don't nail this one, then I'm signing on to a minimum wage job agency. Unfortunately, I didn't get it, so the next day I went down and signed into the job agency. They told me that they have a job in a factory that designed and printed boxes and that I could start tomorrow. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was money in my bank. I was there for a few months and a job came up in their graphics department. I went for it and I got it. I've been there for nearly 3 years now and I've already had a promotion. I've had all in-house training and I honestly couldn't be happier. I truly believe someone was looking out for me to give me this opportunity. In 2 years, I won $11,203, a trip to the Super Bowl, a trip to the AMAs, a trip to a UFC fight, a trip to the NFL draft, and close to 10 to 15 grand worth of small prizes. Grills, DVDs, gift cards, and small electronics. Heck, when I was at the Super Bowl on that trip I won, I got a text from my wife stating I won the final in the Super Bowl squares. Are you a professional or hobbyist contester? I know a guy who enters contests as a hobby and he's won all sorts of trips, event tickets, occasionally money, but usually he wins an ill-fitting t-shirt or a product sample. The Valentine's Day before my wedding, a local jewelry store had a giveaway for a pearl necklace. Not that kind, you sicko. I won and I was able to wear it in my wedding a couple of months later. Okay, this isn't my proudest one, but I put $250 on Trump winning the election. Not when he was actually the Republican candidate. No, about a week after he announced. It was more of a joke between me and a college that would bet a decent sum on a super high payout candidate. Either you go big or you go home. I never expected him to win. Also, I'm not American, so I have no valid political opinion of the man. And we all know how that turned out. Student debt? Gone. All legal, taxes paid. I'm not going to tell you how much because I think there are people who I know who could probably trace this back to me or remember me placing the bet. It paid for a master's degree at a well-known university. Not all of it, but the remainder of what was still open. I met my partner. He was an English backpacker traveling down Australia. I was an Australian doing an internship on an island. We got waylaid by the same cyclone, ended up in the same very small coastal town, in the same backpackers hostel, and we fell in love. I feel so lucky, even though it's been hard. Immigration is a crap show. Because we met so early in life, we've been able to enjoy so many experiences together and grow together. Can't get luckier than that. What was the most epic comeuppance you've ever seen a spoilt brat get? I guess the situation is only epic to me because it seems like spoiled kids always win. I took my kids to a children's museum when they were toddlers. There was a specific area for toddlers with a whole grocery store set up. Such is life there. There was an 8 or 9-year-old kid in the toddler area being a pain in the butt. He kept taking all of the other kids' toys, hoarding all of the shopping carts. He'd hand out a few pieces of food to the kids, but mainly wouldn't let them touch or play with anything else. Now, normally I'd let my own awesome kid deal with the situation. He doesn't take crap from anybody. But they started getting into it when this kid got on my son's nerves, and then the older kid hit my son. Done. I went over to the kid, got right up in his face and said, "No, we do not hit, get out." Instant tears. He dropped all of his toys and left the play area. His mum caught the tail end of the scene and tore him a new one. "What is wrong with you? I can't turn around for 2 minutes. Then some other parent has to come in and tell you how to behave?" Unfortunately, too little too late for that one. I played football in the local kids' league. One kid from another team was basically untouchable as his dad was a major sponsor of the league and would donate money for uniforms and drinks and stuff. His son was a pretty good receiver but didn't like getting hit, and his parents made a big deal out of leaving their son alone so he could develop his skills. He was insufferable. Anytime he scored a touchdown, he'd do over-the-top celebrations and mock all of the other players, his teammates included. Then came high school. Most of the kids from the league ended up in one of 2 schools. He went to mine, along with some other players, and during tryouts he did do well. The coaches were mostly focused on skills and minimal contact during the first few rounds of cuts. The final round was when things got interesting. Full contact was permitted and he got rocked over and over again. No one was actually trying to tackle any harder than normal, it's just that this guy didn't know what to do when he got tackled. So he screamed and cried a lot. He didn't make the team. That is until his dad came down to the school and offered to donate money for uniforms and some other goodies for our sports team. So he made the team and again we were told to take it easy on him. So we did, but the other teams didn't. And he went up against some of the players he'd mocked previously. And they remembered. Our quarterback kept passing to him and he was getting repeatedly smashed, over and over again. It was the only time our team cheered for the other team. He quit playing football after that. Spare the rod and you'll spoil the boy. Obviously, the narrator doesn't actually condone corporal punishment of children, but this is maybe one of those very rare scenarios where shielding the kid from the reality of the fact that tackles happen and should be trained for in football is a bad long-term strategy for the kid and his team. Preferential treatment just sort of screws people up most of the time. Oh, I've got a fun one. This one I handled myself. I waited tables in a breakfast diner a few years back. 2 ladies came in and towed one of their kids along. A chubby boy with gold chains and a nice watch. This kid is probably 10 to 11 for reference. Mum is very clearly tired of dealing with him as he's very demanding. Blurts out what he wants before I can say hi, among some other behavioral issues. Partway through the meal, he holds up his Sprite cup and shakes it at me and utters only the word more. Mum looks aghast and chastises him for being so rude, to which he begrudgingly apologizes. I shrugged and told him, "Don't apologize to me, apologize to your mum." Was a little worried when I came back around with his Sprite and saw his hot, salty tears streaming down his chubby face. Mum left me a $10 tip on the $30 bill, however, so I think she was happy with my service. I went on a bushwalk in Singapore, and there are pretty clear signs around to not feed the monkeys as they can get aggressive. Anyway, there were these 2 boys around the ages of 8 swearing and throwing sticks and rocks at a little monkey in a tree. The dad was standing there laughing and allowing this to go on. I was about to say something when one of the kids ripped open a bag of Skittles and started throwing them. The monkey immediately ran down the branch, snatched the Skittles, and at the same moment, another 3 monkeys came out of nowhere and in an epic display of monkey justice, swarmed the kids, making them and the dad run away for dear life. I used to work at a women's shelter. Christmas time rolls around and a man and his sourpuss teenaged son come to the door. He says his son would like to donate some items to the kids staying at the shelter. Great! The man and his son started hauling in some expensive items. There was an Xbox, a bunch of games, a flat-screen TV, iPod, cool headset, a few other things. Turns out the kid ran his mouth and the dad made him give everything to the other kids. Christmas was pretty cool for our gang that year. I worked as an outdoor camp instructor. One week I was on logistics and had to drive the van to pick up kids. I'd heard from my friend that one of the kids in his group was a little crapbag, backchatting, being lazy, bullying other kids. When I got to the pickup point, the kids hopped into the van and my mate got in the front seat. He gave me the rundown on the trouble causer. As I started the van up, I did a visual check of seatbelts and everyone was good except for this one kid. I asked and he said no. I told him I can't leave until he puts it on. So he did and I started to leave. A minute down the road, I heard him unclip his seatbelt, so I had to stop the van and ask him again. He put it back on. This happened one more time. On the third time, I just pulled over, turned the van off, I radioed base and asked for my manager and the overseeing teacher who was this kid's dean to come and pick this kid up because he was a danger to the others in the van. That's when this kid started pleading and begging. I told him no, I already made the call. He got sent home. My mate Mitch had one of his best weeks after this kid left. One time I wouldn't give my daughter a push on the swing because she was whining instead of asking. She knows we don't listen to whining, but her grandpa was there, so she was testing me. When she figured out I really wasn't going to do it, she grabbed the rope from the swing and flung the swing at me. It missed me, came back and smacked her right in the face. I'm sure it hurt too because it was a board with rope through the middle. Not that I'm happy that my kid was hurt over it, but I think it taught her about karma that day. I think I was around 9 or so when I made friends with another kid down the road. It was his grandparents' place and he visited a lot. If I remember correctly, we met through baseball. He was incredibly overweight and bossy. He always made the rules of the games we played and would throw major tantrums if I objected. For instance, while playing with action figures, I had the toy do some cool flips. He went crazy saying how it needed to be realistic. The first time I visited his house, I was blown away by the volume of toys he had. Growing up fairly poor, I was accustomed to having maybe one cool toy. He had all the PlayStation games and a huge collection of anime VHSs. Not surprisingly, his parents were overweight as well, and would make dense dinners that would take me 2 days to recover from. Eventually, one sleepover, he wanted to play wrestle with me. Didn't take but a second to know how bad of an idea that was, with him being more than 100 pounds, especially since he wanted us to be shirtless. I know, right? So I refused and he cried, telling me to take my shirt off and to wrestle. I remember walking out and asking his mum for a ride home. She just gave me the look of, I understand. 2 days later, he showed up to my house asking for me to come out. My brother told him I wasn't home as I walked by the door to the kitchen. He flipped out and that's the last I heard of him. I didn't know you were friends with Eric Cartman. On the first day of a 2-week vacation, I saw my spoiled 10-year-old cousin tell his mother, his older female cousin, his aunt and his grandmother that he wasn't going to clear his place or rinse his dishes because that's woman's work. For the rest of that 2-week vacation, nobody had to lift a finger to clear a plate, rinse a dish or wash a pot because it was his job. At times, there were over a dozen of us there. That's right, ladies, work the misogyny right out of the kid. He's got time to learn, and there's still hope for him as long as these sorts of important lessons are being taught. The narrator probably wouldn't have survived that women's work quote if he had tried that crap growing up. Here at UConn, they serve special mac and cheese on certain days. I'm sure a lot of schools do it, but our bacon jalapeno mac is pretty damn good. Well, a certain sophomore from a wealthy family who was used to being bailed out of trouble by his rich parents got drunk and decided he wanted some mac and cheese. He was clearly intoxicated and had the brass pair to walk around the food court drinking beer. The manager sees this and won't let him in the food line. As seen in a video someone took, our boy spent the next 10 minutes mercilessly berating the poor guy and his staff for being beneath his station. The manager gives him so many chances to just walk away, but this guy isn't leaving without his mac and cheese. He shoves the manager, not for the first time, and another employee decides he's done with this crap. The hero employee tackles our boy and pins him. The craphead spends the next few minutes pinned to the ground while the cops arrive, screaming, "I'm absolutely fricked!" and he's arrested. Not his first arrest either, and not his first expulsion from college. From what I hear, he's since been arrested or expelled from another school. We'll never forget you, mac and cheese kid. Maybe not the harshest, but it still pleased me. I used to work at a pony camp that catered to rich kids from a very nice neighborhood. We'd have really spoiled kids all the time. While annoying, the most frustrating part was trying to maintain authority just so the little bags of crap don't get themselves crushed by a 1,000-pound animal. Anyway, we had a maybe 10-year-old kid from some mildly famous sportscaster one week. The kid was just awful. She ignored everything we told her and was mean to the other kids in camp. At one point, she started a physical fight with another girl, and when she felt like she was getting beaten, she started yelling, "Don't you know who my mom is? I'm gonna tell her." The other kid got scared and started crying. My coworker replied, "Actually, I do know your mom, and I know she wouldn't like to hear about this. Why don't I call her right now?" The little brat didn't believe her, so my coworker did. She was much easier to deal with for the rest of the week after that. Turns out my coworker worked with her mum many times over the years. She's a professional makeup artist for TV and did her makeup more than a few times. Suck it, you spoiled brat.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I used to work at a non-overnight summer camp and after-school program, and a week-long soccer camp. The town isn't huge, so needless to say, over the few years I got to know several kids from different programs. One 10-year-old boy I knew from after school was a total jerk. Bully, snob, didn't think he had to listen, a tattletale, which is my personal pet peeve. He was just awful. He came to my soccer camp and proceeded to make fun of an 8-year-old girl because she had cleats where he had the newest Nikes and a brand new cool design ball. Unfortunately for him, I also knew this 8-year-old girl and knew that the reason her cleats looked old and worn down is that she was a mother-frickin' beast, just all-around amazing athlete who loved soccer and played hours every day. So I paired him with her for a simple drill where one person started with the ball and you just tried to get past the other person and kick the ball at the other stationary ball or cone about 10 yards away to simulate passing and scoring accurately while under pressure. He was of course angry, saying she was too young and a girl. I said if he hit the cone 3 times, he could pick his own partner. He again pointed out her shoes to me as if that were going to change my mind, before finally giving in and playing. She proceeded to humiliate him over the next few minutes, not once letting him dribble past her in 5 attempts. He was livid, bending down, messing with laces as if the shoes really mattered, and then saying he needed to use his ball. Nothing worked. He was so angry I thought he was going to be violent, but then it was her turn to be on offense. He talked some kind of smack, I forget what, and refused to let her use his ball. She didn't say a word and got a new ball. I blew whistle and she did a step-over fake, which made him move to the side. She stood back up straight and kicked it between his legs and hit the cone. She'd barely even moved, and he was so frickin' angry. Second round, he charged at her, screaming. She kept her cool, wound back like she was going to drill it to his dumb face. He ducked and squealed as she dribbled around him with his hands still covering his head, and she hit the cone. I didn't make her embarrass him for the remaining 3 attempts, and called a water break. This kid was just dumbfounded. He honestly thought his shoes were going to make him better without any effort. He was better behaved the rest of the week, but I honestly think she just broke his spirit. He seemed out of it. I hope he's doing alright. The girl is like an all-American high school soccer player last I checked. Won't be surprised if it's her in the Olympics one day. I was on a flight from Washington Dulles to Heathrow. This 6 to 8-year-old behind me was screaming the whole flight, constantly whining at his mum for food, toys, whatever. Mum was the "shh, honey, no, honey, shh, sweetheart" kind of type of mum. Finally, she had to get up to use the restroom. The kid starts wailing. The guy next to me leaned up in his seat, turned around and said, "Hey, kid, shut the frick up." The whole plane didn't clap, but we enjoyed 5 minutes of dead silence from him until Mum came back. This one was told to me by my parents since I was too young to remember at the time. The neighborhood bus stop for the Catholic high school was on the corner of where our house sits. Sometimes when it was raining, the kids would wait right next to our house for cover. That didn't bother my parents. They had kids. They didn't want someone else's kids standing out in the rain. What did bother them was when they realized the kids started passing the time by ripping up all the flowers around the house. The parents called the school to complain and had a nice chat with the principal. That Saturday, all the kids who used that stop showed up to replant the flowers, which they or their parents paid for. When the flowers were replanted, they got to spend a few more hours helping with our other yard work. Then the school moved their bus stop to the main road on the edge of the neighborhood. That meant about 2 more blocks of walking every day for most of them and waiting in a field with no shelter from the bad weather. That seems like a lot of time and money to invest in punishing what essentially are just dumb idiot kids not thinking their actions through. Then again, even if this group had learned their lesson, the following year's kids might do the same thing, so I guess it was a preventative measure. Was at a family event for my girlfriend of the time. One of her cousin's kids was just running around making a ruckus in spite of the numerous times his parents told him to settle down. Eventually, he took an interest in the motion-activated Glade air freshener on the counter. It had been turned off because it would be spraying non-stop with all the people around. So this little 6-year-old bag of crap is standing on his tiptoes, ignoring the constant warnings of, "Don't touch that, please," and reaching over, pushing buttons, and eventually it happens. Flips the switch to on, and 3 seconds later, he gets a direct blast of Glade straight to the face. I worked at Taco Bell in high school. At the time, we had kids' meals. This kid comes in with his parents and orders a kids' meal. Apparently, he had been in recently and already had that toy. He started screaming at me to get him another toy. His dad looked at me with an absolutely dejected look on his face and begged me to get the toy. I dug through the new box of toys and found one. The kid ripped it out of my hands and ran outside, directly into a rose bush. My coworker was legit laying on the ground, laughing. I was at the park with my brother's wife and their daughter, my niece, and oversaw the following exchange. A young kid, probably between 5 and 7, was being obnoxious. Every 15 minutes or so, his grandparents, I assume they were his grandparents, they'd gather his toys and bring him over to their bench and put him in timeout for a few minutes. He threw tantrums, but they would completely ignore him when he screamed and calmly asked him if he was finished. Timeout didn't stop until he stopped crying. He'd go back to playing, then get all wound up and end up in timeout again. This happened 3 or 4 times in the hour that we were at the park. Finally, he made a little girl cry by taunting her that she didn't have a certain toy and he did. I think it was a Minecraft thing. The grandparents calmly walked over, took the toy from him, gave it to the little girl, and they left the park. This kid lost his absolute crap the entire time they were heading out. Boy Scout camp out in Utah. Back when the Boy Scouts were pretty much run by the Mormon church, a porcupine walked through our camp and this spoiled rich kid got a stick and chased it up a tree. We all told him to stop. He wouldn't listen. The scout leaders were off doing God knows what at the time, so this porcupine is up in the tree and now the spoiled weenie wants to shoot hard candy at it with his wrist rocket. He can't get a clear shot, so he climbs up the tree and sits on a branch under the porcupine, shoots a hard candy at the porcupine and hits it hard. It was right then that he learned that when a treed porcupine feels threatened, it just lets go and lets the quills break the fall. This big porcupine fell right onto the spoiled kid's shoulder, bounced off, hit his thigh, and then landed on the ground. It waddled away and we just laughed at the now howling, spoiled kid. One of the scout leaders had to drive the kid to an emergency room. I hope the scout leader caught hell for not supervising as well. I went to high school in a super affluent area, and a few years after I graduated, a bunch of kids got busted because a kid paid his tutor for a flash drive with a key swiping code, stole several teachers' passwords, and changed his and his friends' grades in the system. They made an argument in their defense that it wasn't their fault because they were so wealthy and used to being handed things that they didn't know how to work for them. Affluenza and whatnot. They got expelled. They made national news for being arrogant D-bags, and all the other districts in the area argued over who would take them because nobody wanted to. A few years later, my alma mater made national news again when a prom draft ring was exposed, where guys would get together and have a fantasy football-style draft over who got to take whom to prom. It was exposed after a girl complained to administration that she didn't want to go with the guy who picked her in the draft, and the guy threw a tantrum because apparently he had paid off a bunch of people to get first pick, and thus he felt he owned her on prom night. Everyone in the draft was suspended or banned from prom, if I remember correctly. Arrogant rich kids are the worst. I was about 15. I was in the woods with some friends, a local public nature reserve, playing on a rope swing, drinking energy drinks and eating snacks, chatting, just having a good time keeping to ourselves, really. The rope swing itself was on a very tall tree, hanging over what I can only explain as a miniature valley. 2 small hills with a gap in the middle, rope swing on one side, but we'll reach the other side. You get it. Then some other kids came along on their bikes. Maybe between ages 10 and 12, dressed up in tracksuits and quite mouthy. You know the type. They told us to move along from their rope swing. It wasn't theirs. I set that thing up myself because I was like Spider-Man kid back then. I could climb anything. Obviously we said no, but we did say we'll leave it to them for a bit if they want to have a go, because there's no reason we can't all enjoy it. They wouldn't take that answer, so we carried on playing on the rope swing, but then they began throwing sticks and rocks at us. It didn't faze us at first. Next thing, one of them tries to show off and speeds down the hill on his bike to try and grab me while I swing. But his mate throws a stick at the same time and it lodges in his wheel and sends him flying down the hill. To add insult to injury, he flies off right in my swing path and gets 2 knees to the ribs. Completely took the wind out of him, so they all left feeling defeated. It feels good because we did nothing out of order, the cards just kind of worked out for us. How about that kid who tried to get off from killing 4 people in a drunk driving accident by claiming he suffered from affluenza, being too rich to know right from wrong? He was caught after fleeing to Mexico and ended up serving just 2 years in prison. When did you troll law enforcement, and what happened? College town. Huge party. Excise cops are in town busting parties left and right. Ours gets busted. They proceeded, handing out tickets to underage drinkers. One kid gets a scrap of a piece of paper, folds it into the shape of the tickets the cops are handing out, and sits on the front steps with his head in his hands repeating, "My parents are gonna frickin' kill me." And the cops just pass him by. There was a speed trap where I grew up on Pennsylvania Route 74. One of the markers, since it was a VASCAR trap, was a white plastic jug. I often stopped along that route when I saw the jug there, grabbed the jug, and drove off. I got stopped once doing this. The cop seemed really angry. I told him, "I see that thing there all the time, and it really bothers me that no one's bothered to pick up the trash." I was speeding once, and I mean seriously speeding. I saw the lights come up behind me and I freaked out. I pulled over and noticed I had a bottle of water next to me. I took it and poured it all over my lap and put on the most embarrassed look that I could. He asked if I knew why he'd pulled me over, and I responded, "I'm sorry, officer, I really had to pee and I was trying to get to the nearest restroom, but…" And then I made big innocent eyes. I peed myself. Something in me knew that this cop didn't want me to touch his pen, his paper, didn't want to touch my license, nothing. As far as he was concerned, I was just gross. He said, "Well, next time use the bathroom before you go and slow it down," and he let me go. When I was a senior in high school, we got a new vice principal from some inner-city school who thought he was a real hard case. He'd actually go around smelling kids' fingers for the scent of devil's lettuce. My buddy and I came back from lunch one day, both stone-cold sober, and heard Mr. Hardcase, whose real name I forget, he was coming out of the parking lot to check fingers. My friend looked at me, then wedged his right hand down the back of his pants to his butt crack. He left it in there until we saw the VP coming our way, then pulled it out nonchalantly while we waited. Sure enough, the VP walked up and in his usual threatening manner told us to hold out our hands. I did. He smelled my fingers, then moved on to my friend. I could barely keep from losing it as he took a big sniff and then literally jumped backwards, yelling something about my friend needing to wash his damn hands. Needless to say, this ended the finger-smelling technique at my high school. I'm going to say here that personally I think smelling any part of a pubescent child is a pretty terrible idea, even before you consider the gross and pervy side of things. That gross kid probably helped the VP dodge a bullet in the future. Around 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, I was pulled over for suspicion of DWI. I hadn't had a drop. They asked me to step out of the car and gave me a sobriety test, which I passed with flying colors. They asked me if they could search the vehicle, and I told them they could search the vehicle with the sole exception of the center console. They'd need a warrant for that. After several hours of sitting roadside, they finally produced a warrant from a judge. The center console was empty. This was about 10 years ago. My mother had a large plant in a plastic pot that had died. I took the pot full of dirt and put it in the trunk of my car to help replant something at my house. I forgot about it for a few weeks. I got pulled over for something else. The cop asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "Was it the speeding or was it because of the pot in my trunk?" He got me out of the car and had me put my palms on the hood while I was searched. He opened the trunk and wasn't happy. I got chewed out for wasting his time and such. I noticed that not one single car passed, so it wasn't wasting too much of his time. I've never actually done this, but I always wanted to. Get 5 total friends together, all wearing costumes, dress up as a biker, construction worker, Indian, cowboy, and a GI. then go to a public place where the police walk around and just follow the cop. When my buddy and I were about 16 and stupid as hell, we did a lot of nonsense playing on cops, but this was by far our best. We'd spend a ton of time lurking around grocery and toy stores at 3 a.m., toy stores earlier, obviously, until one of us got an idea looking at an item in a way that it wasn't intended to be used in the way we wanted to use it. Normal hilarity ensued, Vaseline on padlocks, bubbles in fountains, that kind of stuff, but this night was different. We're sitting in the sandwich aisle of our local store and my buddy's eyes lit up. He looks over at me and goes, "Get that peanut butter, the smooth kind." This having been about the 4th year of us doing this, I wasn't 100% sure what he was going to use it with, but I knew not to question it. So I bought 2 of those huge, smooth peanut butter things. We walked outside, crossed the street, and he tells me to rip the seal off the peanut butter and to get some on my fingers and mess up the smooth top. This is where it clicked. We then proceeded to walk absolutely as suspiciously as possible through this little town square. Sure enough, halfway through, we get spotlighted. The cop pulls up, tells us to stop, and we both instinctively put the peanut butter behind our backs, obviously holding something. The cop gets out and the conversation with my friend goes like this. "What have you got there, son?" "Nothing." "What's behind your back?" "Nothing." I couldn't help but giggle a little bit. "Show me your hands." My buddy very slowly puts the peanut butter behind his shoes and socks and shows the cop his hands. "Give me that." "It's mine." The cop reaches behind my friend's feet and grabs this jar of peanut butter. He spins the top off and sees that it's not in pristine shape. Demands to know what's in it. "Peanuts, salt, maltodextrin, red 3. "What did you hide in the peanut butter?" "Nothing." "Then why do you have it?" "Sandwiches." The cop looks at my pal and then back at me, still holding the peanut butter behind my back, and he does it. He shoves his hand and arm into my pal's peanut butter and starts throwing hunks out into the parking lot. And my friend loses it. He went off on a tirade of peanut rights, the peanut rebellion, just harassing us because we're white, peanut civil rights, the peanut pride parade, who doesn't know about the PPP, and on and on. The cop realizes there's nothing in it and turns to me furious. Doesn't say a word, just grabs my peanut butter, almost knocks me over. I tell him Mr. Goodbar's lawyer will hear of this. This guy does the same thing to me and I launch into a tirade about my working family and our right to sandwiches, and the peanut labor movement and collective bargaining rights and candy power fighting the man, so on and so forth. He figures out what's going on, slams himself back into his car, covered in peanut butter, yells something about us breaking curfew, kinda half chuckling, and tears out. My friend tells him he owes us a sandwich as he drives away. And I thought that was the end of the story, and it was until 5 years ago. I was telling this to my brother's best friend, who I didn't know was the son of the police dispatcher for our town at the time. Apparently, he had to go back and fill out incident paperwork as there was no way to hide this peanut stuff on his steering wheel, car, and uniform. The next day, there was a sandwich on his chair. The day after that, baseball peanuts in his locker. The day after, peanut butter in the showers, and so on and so forth. He still gets peanut-related trolling to this day. In short, trolled a cop with peanut butter that could have had substances in it, but had nothing. Other cops get in on the prank afterwards. I refuted a police noise complaint with a decibel meter and a printout of the Boston Municipal Code on noise ordinance. The best kind of right is technically right. I mean, honestly, that's fantastic. They can't even use the parting shot of just keep it down, because you can point to the decibel meter and say, "We are." Awesome. My friend's story. He was smoking green herb in high school with his best friend. They were both guys. They had to sneak away from their parents, so they smoked in one of their cars at a scenic outlook near Roanoke, Virginia. Sure enough, officers found them in the car, but luckily they'd already finished and put the green stuff away. When the officer asked my friend what he was doing there, the officer suspected what they were doing. My friend said he was in love with the other guy and they were about to make out. The damn southern cop didn't know what hit him, so he just walked away. It was a few days before New Year's in the Bay Area's Chinatown. I was about 14 then, and me and my group of friends would always walk from school to my house just to hang out and play video games. There were about 6 of us walking up this really steep hill to where I lived. When you've lived in the same area for 10 years, you notice things that are unusual, out of place, and just don't seem right. The strange thing I noticed was a guy, late 30s, with sunglasses on and a hat, sitting in a white pickup truck reading a magazine. We were inside my apartment for about 30 minutes before we decided to go get some food. I saw the truck on the other corner and the guy spots us. He rolls down the window and yells, "Do you guys have any fireworks for sale?" I told him I couldn't hear him, but I clearly heard him. He asked again. I said, "Do you guys have any fireworks for sale?" I told him again that I couldn't hear him. All of a sudden, he makes a turn, goes down the hill and pulls right up to us. "Do you guys have any fireworks for sale?" I said, "Nope." And he goes, "I know you guys do. I'm not a cop, so it's cool." I told him that it doesn't matter if he's a cop or not, we don't sell fireworks because it's illegal. He starts to get irritated and starts yelling at us at this point. "Come on guys, stop being wussies. I just want to buy some fireworks for my kids." We're actually walking down the street with him slowly driving next to us, asking. I told him one last time, "I know you're a cop and you're just doing your job, but honestly, we don't sell fireworks. And by the way, a cable car is coming." He goes, "So what?" And I told him, "Because you're going down a narrow one-way street with the cable car coming up the hill towards you." He literally crapped his pants as he could see the cable turn the corner in full speed. He reverses as quickly as he can, clipping a few cars on his way up the hill. A cop on top of the hill sees this and pulls the guy over. The guy gets out of his truck and pulls out his badge to show the other cop that he was undercover.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Okay, so we weren't really intentionally going out of our way to troll them, but it's the closest thing I have. Early in high school, maybe 15 years old, my friends and I are cutting through a church parking lot because there's a trail through the woods on the other side, leading from one of my friends' houses to the others. We all notice the smell of burning green herb while we're near the church, so we're looking around trying to figure out who's smoking. My friend sees someone move inside the church, it's like 1 a.m. at this point, pretty weird, and goes over to check it out. Soon enough, there's 8 cop cars in the parking lot. As it turns out, someone had tried to break into this church the night before, and the pastor and his entire family were sleeping inside in case they came back. They thought that we were the perps returning. The cops just absolutely didn't believe that we were just passing through and smelled the same thing that they surely did and were just checking out the situation. They detained us for 60 to 90 minutes looking around the surrounding forestry for our stuff. One of the cops was going around to each entrance to the church to check for signs of attempted entry. At the back door, he found a roach from a joint on a ledge right inside the church. Apparently, it was the pastor's daughter who had been lighting up right out back and quickly put out the joint and left it when she heard her dad yell because he saw us at the front. They wound up letting her off with a warning and gave me and my friends a free ride for the 1 mile to where we were going with their flashing lights on, which was pretty frickin' cool when we were 15. I grew up in a small town, really small. The only way to have any form of entertainment was to drive 30 minutes to the next city to go to the movies and bowling. It just so happens that on the highway halfway between the two cities there was a small town known for being a speed trap. The highway was out of the jurisdiction of the local cops, so what the marshal would do is hide in the between overpasses to catch speeders, force them to pull over into the frontage road, which was in his jurisdiction. Then he'd claim an exaggerated speed. When people asked to see his radar, which is perfectly legal, he claimed he didn't have to because it was illegal. Any claims reported to his superiors seemed to go ignored until he ran into me. Over time, my friends and I had timed his patrols and realized that he patrolled towards the end of the month. One time he'd stopped a friend for excessive speeding. The officer claimed 92 in a 60 zone, which is BS, and then we knew something had to be done. The officer had taken his plate number and claimed to have seen it speeding many different times, and we knew he'd be looking out for it. So I decided to take my phone and rig it up to record the speedometer and get pulled over by the officer. It took a few tries, but I managed to get pulled over by the same officer for doing 70 in a 60 zone, that being a first-time offense. After giving him my license, he went on to claim I was doing at least 85, and giving me the whole bit about how he can't show me the radar, as well as giving me a ticket claiming it was a repeat offense and how I should be put into jail, with all of this being caught on my phone without him noticing. So a few days later, I show up to the courthouse to pay the ticket, and I managed to talk to the mayor of the town and showed him the video of all this. Thanks to me, the officer got fired, and I didn't have to pay a $400 ticket from that D-bag. In my case, the cops trolled us. Huge house party. A once-a-year thing around Christmas, the famous pirate party. Lady wenches and undressed dudes with eye patches everywhere. Drunken freshmen as far as the eye can see. The cops are called, which we anticipated. They showed up and it's 2 guys in their 30s. One is just tired, end of a long day, and didn't really seem to want to be dealing with this crap show. The other was kind of amused by all the nautical debauchery. When 2 of the housemates, both over 21, went out to talk to the cops, the more serious cop just says, Look, just get some of these people out of there. We don't want a scene, so tell them that we won't arrest anyone. The other cop chimes in with his very best pirate voice, unless they're scallywags. The first cop facepalms and gives his partner this look that says, really, dude? Everyone cracks the frick up and clears out in a good mood, taking most of the drunken 18-year-olds elsewhere. This is how police should be most of the time. Polis means of the people. You should only have to worry about them resorting to force or intimidation in situations that are dangerous to them. Good job, Pirate Popo. My mother drives a Jeep, which the top is often off on. We pulled up in the fire lane out in front of a bank because my mum's kind of an idiot and she ran inside to use the ATM. I was 15 at the time, and while she's inside, a police officer walks up to the Jeep, sticks his head in the driver's window and says, "Is this your vehicle, son?" To which I replied, "Yes, I sometimes like to park in illegal places and sit in my own passenger seat." He didn't say a word, stood back, crossed his arms and just glared at me. My mum came out about 10 seconds later. He took a look at her and said, "Have a nice day, ma'am," and walked away. Junior year of college, all of my roommates and I were 21 years of age. I was the only one with a car, so I was the only one who always had to go on beer runs. You can say that I look a bit underage for my age and I drove a sportier car. So within the first month of buying alcohol from this one place, I got pulled over 4 times after leaving the liquor store. 4 times. I'm not kidding. I noticed they had no reason to pull me over except for the fact that I looked under 21. The cops did play legally, I guess, by following me until I did something stupid or noticed something broken with my car. License plate light out, took a right turn into the second lane, side view mirror was broken, rolling stop right onto a red light. They made me do a sobriety test once in our busy college street. I got a lot of honks. Well, after completely inspecting my car, I went out again to purchase alcohol. No surprise, I was being followed by cops when I left. I knew that if I drove perfectly, they couldn't pull me over. I drove around the block for about 15 minutes, and I was shocked they were still following me. I eventually hopped onto the highway, got off, and then back on. After about 40 minutes of charades, I was getting thirsty and missing the pregame, so I pulled into my driveway. The cops followed me, waited until I opened my trunk and ran in, and then asked to see my ID for the liquor. I pulled it out with a big grin, and they got in their cars and left. I never got pulled over again, maybe because they finally realized, hey, this idiot is 21. I'm an attorney, and a client was complaining about being followed by the cops every time he was in town. I met him at his house and drove his car one Saturday night. Sure enough, about 5 minutes later, a local cop started following me. I made like 20 turns, all legal, and the cop followed me in every turn. He quit following me when I pulled up into my office parking lot, but I waved as he drove by. I told the client to get a different car, and his problems stopped with bullcrap traffic cops. I told the district attorney what I did, and I got better plea offers for cases where cops were being jerks. A story my troll dad likes to tell is from when he was in dental school at USC in the 70s. The street right next to the building with the dental labs is a really long block, so a lot of people just cross in the middle of the street instead of going to a streetlight. There used to be cops who'd write a lot of jaywalking tickets to people who'd do that. My dad and his friends would make giant water balloon launchers using surgical tubing, and they'd launch water balloons, which they made from dental gloves, at the cop. Once, he saw where they were launching from, but he couldn't get into the building because he didn't have the proper security codes. I work as a paramedic, and often the cops call us out to take someone that's drunk to the hospital. This is really stupid because it just clogs up the ERs and costs all kinds of people unnecessary money. Not to mention the fact that they only call us because they don't want the paperwork of taking someone to jail for such a stupid thing. So we get called out one night around midnight to some guy who's chucked up in the parking lot and was wobbly on his feet. He was pretty damn drunk. Nothing a good night's sleep wouldn't cure though. When we pulled up, who was there but the jerk cop who wrote me a ticket the week before? I told my partner who this was and he took the lead. The cop didn't recognize me. The cop gave us a quick rundown, so we checked the guy out and then this happened. My partner said, "So, what do you want me to do with him?" The cop said, "Take him to the hospital." "Why? There's no medical problem. We're concerned about alcohol poisoning." "Well, I'm not and I have more training than you." "Look, just take him." "No, we really don't operate like that." "Well, he needs to go sober up." My partner asks the patient, "Do you want to go to the hospital?" The guy says no. "See, I can't force him." "Well, he can't stay here in the parking lot." "Oh, I see the problem now." The cop's face lights up. "Yeah?" "Yeah, he's your problem. We don't take drunks for just being drunk." The cop looks stunned and then turns to me hoping for a different answer. He still doesn't recognize me. I said, "Maybe you can just give him a ticket." Then the fire captain got in the cop's face and threatened to get his supervisors out of the scene to adjust the officer's attitude, saying things like, "You don't talk to my medics like that. The fire department has that kind of clout here." We left and I giggled for a few days afterwards. I live right outside of my city's limits, which means I'm right outside of the local police department's jurisdiction. In high school, my friends and I would always hang out at my house, so one night we all decided to go to the local McDonald's to raid the dollar menu. We were riding through town, not causing too much trouble. We got our feast and were heading back to my house when we realized there's a cop following us. Now, we're playing music loud enough for it to be heard, but still quiet enough not to be noise pollution. We were also going a few miles over the speed limit like most people did. I guess the officer realized we were leaving the city limit and wanted to catch us before we got away. We were literally 100 feet away from the city limit sign and 400 feet from my driveway when he put on the sirens. Instead of pulling off the road right there in the traffic, I just drove into my driveway and the officer pulls right in behind me. My friends and I get out of the car and the officer pulls his weapon and tells us to get on the ground. My mum and stepdad come running out of the house to straighten the officer out. Chaos ensues and the officer fires a warning shot. This scared the neighbor and they called the sheriff's office and asked for a unit to come. Now it turns out that the local police department and the sheriff's department really don't like each other. A sheriff shows up to respond to the neighbor's call and ends up ticketing the police officer for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Which creepy urban legend turned out to be true? When I was about 12 years old, a friend and I were playing in the woods that were known for being creepy. While building a fort, a strange man snuck up behind us and yelled at us to get off his land and never come back, yada yada. It really startled us as we both knew the land was a public area and had never been threatened by an adult before. Several years later, we found out he was an actual bank robber called Carl Gugasian, wanted by the FBI for years. We were building our fort a few feet from his stash. The man that worked in a law firm on the 24th story of a building. As a running gag, he'd tell everyone that the windows in the building were unbreakable and then proceed to run at them full force. Once he did it and the glass didn't break, but the window popped out of the frame and he fell to his death 24 stories. I'd seen this on an urban legends show when I was a kid, but found out later it really happened in my city of Toronto, Canada. My boyfriend works in the same building and rumor has it that the man landed on a concrete bench at concourse level where a woman and her child had just been sitting there seconds before his fatal plunge. Yeah, my mum worked in an office adjacent to where he fell to his death. Everyone was sent home early in all of the buildings around it. Apparently he'd been doing this stunt for quite a while with the tour groups, and the problem was that he always used the same window. Each time he did it, he was weakening the window until it just couldn't take it anymore. My favorite part of the story is that he was right. The glass didn't break. The whole pane popped out of its frame. The ghost squirrel in my hometown of Dorking in the UK. There was a ghost squirrel called Albie that was only ever seen in the graveyard at the church in town. Turns out it was an albino squirrel that had a nest in one of the trees in the graveyard. Unfortunately, he became roadkill a couple of years back. I live near a lake and there was an urban legend that there were huge lake monsters near the hydroelectric dam. Most people thought it was just some fisherman's tall tales. We all guessed it was just a twist on the classic, one that got away. Turns out, divers went into the water behind the dam for a routine inspection to see if there was any damage after months of heavy flooding in the area. Apparently, one of the divers got too close to what he originally thought was a large moss-covered rock or boulder until it moved and tried to latch onto the diver's arm. Apparently, there are 200-pound catfish behind the dam which thrive on the dead fish that go through the hydroelectric portion of the dam. The agitated water makes it easier for the large catfish to breathe and grow past what's commonly found in the area, and the lack of fishers, as all commercial fishing is banned for at least 1,000 meters, means these fish are truly free to grow to massive sizes. Great, so on top of all the bacteria and parasites that can get us without us realizing when we swim in fresh water, now we have to worry about shark-sized catfish? I know that isn't super threatening, I'm just saying it would scare the crap out of me. Then again, if I'm swimming behind the dam in what sounds like a dead ground-up fish slurry, maybe I have other things to worry about. Oh, I have one. In Anchorage, people will tell the story of a woman who died after getting stuck in only knee-deep mud out in Turnagain Arm. The story has all the elements. She was a newlywed, rescuers were gathered around trying to help her, etc., etc. I think it's widely regarded as an urban legend. But it most certainly did happen. Her name was Adina Dickerson. It took place in September 1988. I guess not really a legend unless you didn't believe it. My town and surrounding area has multiple old pirate smuggling tunnels under it, going from towns to beaches. Most of the tunnels are under pub or shop basements. Also, when I say pirate, I do mean like the R pirates. Penzance, UK. Not creepy so much, but in my small rural hometown, there was a rumor that a bunch of city officials, cops, teachers, business owners, among others, basically anyone a kid would see as an authority figure, had massive adult whoopee parties. Obviously, as you grew up, you came to your senses. Until one year when a teacher's husband stomped the absolute crap out of a local business owner in broad daylight. Turns out the legend wasn't just a legend. His wife was apparently a member of what was called the Hot Tub Club, and he wasn't invited. A good chunk of local leaders got outed as hosting these parties somewhat regularly. I'm more surprised it was kept secret for as long as it was. It was only a legend for like a week, but a kid went missing on the same property we lived on, and everyone thought his brother had something to do with it, but the police said no, he was kidnapped. Turns out the brother had killed his brother and buried him in our backyard. We had an older couple that would come into the store I worked at when I was 15. They clearly had mental development and mental health problems, and the rumor was they were siblings and the two teenage girls with them were their children. About 5 years later, I'd find out someone had called the state about them, and it turns out, from what I remember, it was mostly true. The parents were apparently the result of incest, and they carried on the family tradition, as it were. I think the state removed their daughters and put them in state custody since they weren't able to take care of themselves, and I don't remember what happened to the parents. In my hometown, there was a local legend about a man who would sometimes be seen doing the deed with trees. He had a number of local names, none of which could be said on YouTube. However, most of them involve clever wordplay around wood or trees. I thought it must be nonsense, but one night a friend and I were out walking his dog along a narrow, tree-lined lane when we heard a grunting sound from the undergrowth, and there he was. He was wearing a long overcoat which had wrapped up around a poor innocent tree, and he had his trousers around his ankles as he defiled the shrubbery with a flagrant disregard for splinters. In Kenya, Mombasa, there was a story about a woman with long black hair and a white dress who'd be seen around the beach at night, and it was to stop people from being at the beach swimming in the ocean. Turned out to be true. It was an older lady who'd sleepwalk on the beach in her 90s. Even she didn't know until locals found the courage to follow her home. When I was young, living rural Ontario, we were told as children not to wander too far into the forest, saying that a monster would get us and we wouldn't come home. If anybody knows who Rock-Terrio is, it actually turned out to be painfully true. I often wonder if Stephen King's Children of the Corn was based on a northern town in Maine. I don't recall the name of the town, but my friends and I stopped in on our way to the furthest US point east. The town struck me as very weird because every store clerk was like 14 or 17 max. Not just one or two stores, every store. Aside from ourselves, we didn't come across one adult in the 2 hours or so we were there. It was a depressed town, nearly a ghost town, and it left me with a really unsettled feeling. Black Volga. In the 60s and 70s, there existed an urban legend in Poland that vampires in black limousines were kidnapping people, preferring small infants. It was a tale parents told their kids who'd then tell their friends. Turns out it was a rumor that was spread by the Polish secret police who actually used black cars to kidnap people. The aim was that no one would believe someone who'd report they'd witnessed a kidnapping. I remember being wary around all black cars, since I'd never seen a Volga. Also, I heard the version of the tale where they'd kidnap people to steal their organs and then dump their bodies by the road, which is messed up. Welcome to the world of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, better known by its acronym form. This is an urban legend about a man meeting a woman at a bar, going back to his place to sleep together only to have him wake up to her being gone and the famous slogan, "Welcome to the world of AIDS," written on his bathroom mirror. The urban legend has many different variations. It was just a parable about casual bedroom times and the risk involved. This was largely considered an urban legend, that is until stealth posing actually turned out to be a very real thing. Modern actual cases involve a British man named Darryl Rowe, who, already knowing that he had it, would send a text after doing the deed to his many victims saying things like, "I have human immunodeficiency virus, lol, whoops," and "I'm riddled." Others have also been convicted for knowingly doing this on Craigslist. The Asylum Lake tunnels in Kalamazoo are real. There's a small lake and wildlife area just off WMU's campus, and for a long time there were rumors going around that they were still there and accessible. Well, turns out it was true, and there was an old set of stairs that was partially buried that led up to a walled-up tunnel entrance. A few people used hand tools and ended up breaking part of the wall down and got inside, only to find the tunnels fully intact, albeit a bit damp and murky. Somehow, the authorities got wind and went and sealed the entrance again, but it's still very obvious where that was if you're really looking for them. Not really an urban legend, but a fish cafe in my hometown says that its supports are made out of whale bones. Turns out many years ago, a whale got stranded on a nearby island and died, and the owner took some rib bones and used it as arches for his business. I'd still contest whether they're supports, and that I don't think they add anything to the structural integrity of the building, but it's a cool claim to be able to sort of back up in any case. When I was a kid, my dad would take me and my brother to High Rock. It's a neat overlook, and we could play on the rocks. It was fun, but also a little sobering, as much as things can be for kids, because a girl had died in a hang gliding accident, if I remember rightly. As you drive up to the parking lot of the overlook, the road continues on into the woods. We asked our dad where it went, and he told us you'd be driving down the road, and suddenly armed guards would pop out of the woods to stop you because there's a secret government base there. That's the case, except it isn't really secret. It's Raven Rock, which is a nuclear bunker that can act as a remote Pentagon if the country is attacked. Cheney went there during September 11th while Bush was taken somewhere else. You'll be detained if you trespass on the property. I went back to High Rock a few years ago while visiting family, and while hanging out at the overlook, a truck of teenagers showed up. They asked if I knew what was up the access road, and I told them Raven Rock and not to keep going because they'd be detained. They decided they wanted to check it out anyway. An hour later, when I left High Rock, these kids hadn't come back yet, so I figured they were getting their butts chewed out by a soldier. Fun fact, Raven Rock is the headquarters of the Enclave in Fallout 3. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The North Pond Hermit. Things would go missing in this little vacation community, and people attributed it to some mysterious dude. Turned out there was one. He lived in the woods for 27 years without ever talking to anyone. He said hi to a hiker once during that 27 years, best friend he ever had. We've got a dude in Milwaukee dubbed the Milverine, the Milwaukee Wolverine. He looks sort of like a Midwestern Logan from the X-Men, and he's sighted all over downtown briskly walking around with his shirt off. Like, no matter what he's doing, rain, shine, blistering heat or freezing cold, he's got his shirt off. Turns out he's just a scruffy construction worker who's pretty ripped and vaguely looks like a superhero. Apparently he's a nice guy, and locals often tell people not to bother him because it's just rude. For a while, a few years ago, people were approaching him all the time, probably for photos and whatnot. That creepy old guy living down the street was actually the Golden State Killer. He lived in my neighborhood. I passed his house every day for years and I never talked to him, but it's crazy to think as kids we'd play at the house 2 houses away from his. Sewer alligators. If alligators or other animals are flushed or disposed of into plumbing, yeah, they can survive and hang out. The guy who boarded a plane at LAX for Oakland and found himself instead headed to Auckland, New Zealand. Cropsey. Sort of like the boogeyman of Staten Island. During the 70s and 80s, kids on the island would go missing, and the urban legend would attribute it to Cropsey. As it turned out, there really was a crazy kidnapper and serial killer who was responsible. He was caught and convicted. There's a great documentary about it. It used to be on Netflix, I'm not sure if it still is, called Cropsey. Check it out if you get the chance. Raymond Robinson, the Green Man. The guy lost his eyes and nose and wandered the streets at night in Pennsylvania because he couldn't go outside in the daytime because of how he looked. People saw him and an urban legend in Philadelphia was born. That there's something making people disappear in our area in Nevada. As a kid, it was more so that they were hinting at aliens. Then as we grew up, the disappearances have been a little too eerie, and it's been suspected that there's investigations that have been going on as to whether or not there's a serial killer in our area. I carry a firearm when traveling through and don't stop until I get to the cities. If you guys are ever coming through, just don't stop for anyone, especially after the darkness sets in. I went to a university near Valley Forge, Philadelphia. It used to be a prisoner of war camp and a military hospital before the college bought the entire property for $1 in the 1960s. Since there are only 3 universities near Valley Forge, Philadelphia, it'll be hard not to deduce which college it is. Anyways, there was a rumor that underground tunnels and all sorts of stuff was left abandoned in the abandoned sections of the college. Sure enough, it was true. We found a tunnel hatch under our carpet in our dorm room, 2 hatches on the first floor, furthest most first-floor dorm room of each building. It was like stepping into 1945. Everything was preserved down there and the tunnels were massive. We eventually ended up in an underground garage where there were 4 Jeeps parked, but all the tires had dry rotted. We realized that this was actually beneath our soccer field. Anyways, the tunnels led to the cafeteria, the admin building, every dorm, and then an old abandoned section of our campus that we had no way of entering topside. We soon realized this was the hospital or morgue. Then we got out of the tunnels and walked the floor. It was still like 1945. All the hospital beds were still there, the surgical curtains were still there. Heck, even the tools like the scalpel, saw, and pliers, they were still on their trays. It was like everyone all of a sudden had up and left and nothing had been moved since then. The morgue still had its slabs and sometimes we'd dare each other to slide in there for a period of time. But yeah, it was an urban legend on campus until 3 of us decided to risk expulsion to see if it was true. And it was. The Red Ghost. The huge, cloven-footed creature that terrorized southeast Arizona was no figment of the mind. The grisly story of its origin and fate was more macabre in fact than any fiction. It was a camel with the corpse of its rider on its back, surviving out there way longer than anyone would have guessed. Oh, that poor animal. The narrator went and hunted down the story, and it looks like the creature was hunted pretty extensively and may have survived some bullet wounds before it finally went down. For the last several years in Toronto, gay men have gone missing in the Village. The community was convinced it was a serial killer on the loose, but the police said no. These disappearances are unrelated. Turns out it was totally the case, and the guy was killing gay men, dismembering them and burying them in and around the properties he was working at as a groundskeeper/landscaper. MKUltra. The CIA was experimenting with substances to attempt to mind control people. This is, thankfully, a somewhat more light-hearted urban legend than a lot of the ones posted thus far. So I'd heard several times from friends and whatnot hearsay tales about this creepy, near-mythical shoe licker who resided in the Tampa area. Apparently this guy would walk up to people in public spaces and ask them about their shoes and ask to see the bottoms of them, and would then drop and do his best to lick the bottoms of said shoes before the person could step back down. Naturally, I thought that was just way too weird, and there was no way this wasn't just people making up some bullcrap story. And then I ran into the guy at a taco truck. Skinny dude, longish hair, probably homeless from how he was dressed, could have been 18, could have been 30. Walks up as I'm waiting for what turns out to have been the best taco I've ever had in my existence, and asks about the shoes I'm wearing. I just finished performing and was wearing some Doc Marten boots and was more than a little soused. He asks if he can see the treads or something like that, and I'm all confused, and I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And he drops to the floor, grabs my boot, and starts licking away at the sole. I yelled at the guy, sort of kicked at him, and he scampers off. Weirdest frickin' interaction ever. There were abandoned tunnels below my town. A large part used to be a self-sustaining mental institution covering several square miles. Everyone talked about them, but no one ever talked about actually being in them. Went spelunking in the woods and found an old maintenance shack. There was a basement that was flooded. I went back a couple of years later when there was a bad drought. Basement had a rusted door leading into said tunnels. Nothing special and no escaped crazy people. In my hometown, there were rumors that there was a fallout bunker underground. There were supposed to be tunnels from the schools and various other locations all leading to the bunker. In grade 12, I had a teacher who'd been working at that school for basically forever. One of the students asked him if there was a tunnel from the school to a fallout bunker, and he confirmed that there was. He even took us down into the basement past the boiler room to the entrance. It was boarded up. Apparently it was built during the Cold War. Some woman was living in this guy's house without him knowing it for a year. There's this road called Whippoorwill. Apparently it's either haunted or it's a nesting ground for the Klan and other creepy local cults. There are several articles about it on the internets. Anyways, myself and 2 friends drove there in the nighttime, and a big white Bronco came out of nowhere behind us with huge LED lights and tried to drive us off the road. A very narrow dirt road surrounded by dense trees. They were on our butts, like making us speed. A big hill came in the road. It's about a mile long and you should be going slow. When we went over the top, the Bronco stayed behind us and disappeared. It was intense. I figured they were patrolling for a cult or Klan meeting, but there is some truth to that urban legend, that's a fact. There's an urban legend about a thief stealing a suitcase containing a dead dog. In the 70s, my crazy artist aunt and uncle lived in Manhattan, and their German shepherd died. Having the city come dispose of the dog was expensive, lugging it up to Animal Control Office in the Bronx was cheaper. So they folded up the 50-pound dog into a suitcase and headed for the subway. Except, my uncle set down the heavy suitcase at a crosswalk while they waited for the light, and a couple of kids ran by and snatched it. My uncle gave chase, but obese alcoholics don't get far in New York in the summer. For years they laughed, speculating what those kids said when they opened the luggage. And I wonder, again and again, were they the source of that tale? There's a serial killer targeting gay men in Pittsburgh. Gay men keep turning up in the river after they've been on the Grindr app. Look up Dakota James from Pittsburgh. The police won't release all of the CCTV because they don't want the hysteria. But yep, there's a serial killer there. It keeps happening and no one is doing anything about it. Well, it seems the government really is watching everything we do. Also, no one seems to give a damn. Freddy Krueger is based on a real story. Now, hear me out. There's a small ethnic group located to Southeast Asia, the Hmong people. They've been oppressed for years by various countries, so they fought with the US during the Vietnam Civil War. As you know, we lost, and the North Vietnamese were gearing up to kill the Hmong people who had fought for the Southern Vietnamese. So the US airlifted a bunch of Hmong families to the US, primarily in California and Minnesota. One of the recent immigrants was a young man. He was perfectly healthy but suddenly died in his sleep. No one knew how he died. It was guessed a heart attack, but an autopsy wasn't done. This sent a panic throughout the community. There's a Hmong legend of a spirit that enters your dreams and kills you. Hmong people were terrified. They were also in a new community without access to some old traditions to protect them. Young men started staying awake, trying to avoid the monster. They downed caffeine. They were actually scared enough that it caused stress to their hearts and they died. Eventually, 117 men died from Hmong sleeping sickness. What happened when the teacher caught a student's note in class? I used to teach high school Spanish, and I confiscated a note from a 15-year-old sophomore once. I told the girl I was going to read it in front of the class as I unfolded it and walked to the front of the room. She was begging me not to, like her life depended on it. I later realized why. I had no intention of actually reading it to the class, but I wanted to make her sweat. I was going to make up some stuff like, I have the best Spanish teacher in the world, blah blah blah. And I was absolutely taken aback and stood there with a blank look on my face as I read the first sentence in my head. Hey girl, you ain't gonna believe this, but I'm pregnant again. She already had a 1-year-old. I locked eyes with her, and she gave me this incredibly guilty look, but she was relieved that I wasn't actually going to read it to the class. I was absolutely speechless. When my mother was a teacher in an inner-city middle school, she found a note left behind in a classroom that said something along the lines of, I really hope I can get pregnant by the age of 16 because I don't want my child to have an old mom. I just remember asking myself what was wrong with the world. Not intercepted, but I found it after a lab where two guys would always sit. Pretty sure they both wrote it because it was on the back of one of their lab sheets that they left behind. Person 1 had written, women's chests. Person 2 wrote, yeah, I know. Such a simple exchange, almost poetic, really. 15 years ago, when I was a new teacher, I confiscated a note that was a caricature of me with one hand down my pants and the other pushing a finger up my nose. I still have it. It was really funny. I wish I'd also had a picture of the absolute look of terror on the 6th grader's face when I confiscated it. I gave him a dry, eyebrow-raised look, and we never spoke of it again. He was in my corner after that. In primary school, I had a teacher in grade 5 who'd read out the notes passed around if she caught it happening. So I wrote out a note and made it obvious I was trying to pass it to someone. She got the note, brought it to the front of the classroom, and started to read it out. It said, "Thank you, students, you can all go home now. Class dismissed." She did have a laugh about that one. Yeah, the best sort of teachers to have are the ones who take your education seriously and don't pander to you, but who are also able to take a joke. Seriously, some of them want to be authoritarian figures and some of them want to be liked way too much. This lady has hit a good balance. My chorus teacher sings the notes she catches. She usually just skims through it, but this time she just put the paper on the piano and started singing. It ends up being an entire story about a girl who ended up dating her cousin. Very uncomfortable for the entire room. My friend and I were passing a note about how hot we thought our German teacher was, and he took it up, read it, looked at us, both of us were very red-faced by that point, and just shook his head. The next day, he assigned us seats on opposite sides of the classroom. Toward the end of 8th grade, my band class wanted to do something nice for our teacher. We were passing a note about it around during class, and the teacher caught on and demanded to see it. Of course, no one wanted the teacher to see this note, so someone told the kid who was holding it to eat it. Everyone joined in, and the entire class chanted, "Eat it, eat it." So he shoved the paper into his mouth while looking the teacher right in the eyes. The teacher was so shocked that he let it go, and the surprise went off without any other problems. I taught 8th grade English in a rural county in the Bible Belt. I taught Midsummer Night's Dream after TCAP, standardized end-of-year tests. The last 2 months of school is basically babysitting. I found a note passed between two boys. It was about one of the main characters in the play, and it was written in Elizabethan English. It was written poorly, but they'd really put some effort into the trash talk. I found out later who'd written it and gave them extra credit for paying attention to such a degree as to replicate Shakespearean-style language. It was one of the top 10 that made me excited to be teaching. Teacher took a note from my friend who was asking his other friend if he also looked and compared how hairy their downstairs ball bags were in the locker room. Needless to say, we all erupted in laughter. This was in the 8th grade. My sister is a teacher, grades 3 and 4. They were just learning about some life and health education, but obviously they were still very naive. One day, she caught a note being passed from a boy to a girl saying, "I like your bobs." She found it extremely hard to keep herself composed. It's just so innocent. It was hilarious. I had a teacher confiscate a note I was passing to a friend, only it wasn't a note, it was a tampon. I had a teacher do the same thing, but she didn't think it through first and didn't pretend to read it. She just went on ahead. Unfortunately, it was written to a friend who was constantly bullied by some mean girls, and the note said, "Don't let Alyssa bother you. In 5 years, you'll be graduating college, and she'll be a worn-out working girl." Guess who was in that class with us? The teacher got in a metric crap ton of trouble, which I kind of feel bad about, but not really because she should have read the note to herself first. I got a 3-day suspension. I was more or less right about that girl, though. I had this elderly, mean, nosy teacher in middle school. She was the kind of woman who strode into the nurse's office, sneered at the kids and prodded the nurse to talk about them, especially the little girl with a weight problem. She taught health and some sort of reading class. We got lots of kids who just couldn't read in that school. She was infamous for reading notes she intercepted aloud to the class, so one day, after she intercepted a note of mine asking something trivial and belittling me, I wrote a note and very obviously passed it to the kid at the next table over, urging him to pass it along. It went to 3 kids before she caught it, snatching it out of a girl's hands, striding back to her desk, and reading loudly in her typical condescending tone, "I'm Sofa King, stupid." Seriously. In middle school, my algebra teacher confiscated a note that a couple of us were writing about our new product idea. Mints, but for your hoo-ha. Not a teacher interference, but still embarrassing. One day in my 9th grade English class, very emotional and angsty me decided to write a poem about how hard life is and how out of control I am. Later that night, my sister and her friend came home from hanging out after school, laughing hysterically at a piece of paper. My sister came up to me saying, "Look at this awful poem we found in a desk in," and she gave my teachers' names, "classroom. It's ridiculous and just terrible. We're keeping this one." She had no idea I was the one who wrote it. When I was a freshman in my high school literature class, we all had assigned seating. I'm not sure who instigated it, but a correspondence started between me and another girl from a different period, all written in pencil on the desk. At first, we wrote simple "hi" and "hi yourself" notes. But throughout the semester, our notes got longer and longer, and we became kind of pen pals. We never discussed anything bad. I guess we were both pretty good girls. Our teacher caught on and actually encouraged it. Eventually, we stopped writing on the desk and just left notes on paper to each other. Her class period was before mine, and she left the note she wrote with the teacher. At the beginning of each class, our teacher brought me the note she'd written. Then I'd leave one with him for after class. It went on all year. I went to a Catholic high school just outside of Vancouver. A couple of friends had this thing where whenever the other one was out of the room or not paying attention, they'd draw male members all over their work and binders. One day, one of the kids, Nelson, left to go to the bathroom and awkwardly took all of his books and binders with him, holding it in front of his bathing suit area in the hopes that he wouldn't get all of his homework covered in poorly drawn eggplants. Everyone noticed and kind of laughed at the confusion. When he came back, the other friend passed him a note. The teacher saw it, grabbed it, and read out loud, "Nelson, everyone in the class thinks you're completely rigid down there right now." I intercepted a note from an 11-year-old boy. He was passing the note to a girl he was asking out. The kid was furious with me, and the next day I received a picture he drew of me in a cauldron because I blew his only chance with the girl. Cauldron? Was this kid just extremely unconventional in this muggle school? Or are you a teacher at Hogwarts and you've just blown the entire operation wide open to the internet? Well, it was almost intercepted. I was passing a note, and when the teacher asked me for it, I frickin' ate it. That's right, she sent me to the principal. Think about that conversation. "So, Timmy, why are you here?" "Well, I ate paper." "Son, get out of my office, and don't eat paper." I don't recall what the note said, but I was in 5th grade at the time, so probably some hardcore substance deal out on the playground. There was this one time in 7th grade where 2 kids were passing a note during a test pretty sneakily. Mr. Hoff, our eccentric lab coat-wearing science teacher, picked it up and brought it out to the front of the class to read. In huge letters it said, "Did you check your butthole for butthole AIDS?" Following that it just said, "Yeah man." It was promptly framed and hung above the chalkboard. In short, John Carlo was asked if he had checked his butt for butt-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and he had checked. My freshman year in math, the girl behind me was passing notes to the girl in front of me. She'd just have me hand them over to her. Eventually, after getting tired of passing it for her, I decided to just read them. The note basically said something like, "Something bad's about to happen. I can see my birthmark, and it only shows up when something bad is about to happen." I showed it to the kid next to me, and we started laughing our butts off. She started crying and left the class. In short, read a note from the girl behind me, she cried and left. Her prophecy came true. When I was in junior high, I used to write notes with crazy made-up stories in them, and when no one was looking, I'd drop them in the hallway. I never put any names or anything, so people would wonder who they were about. My mum has been teaching middle school for 25 years, so I figured she'd have some good stories. I just asked, and she said, "Nothing. I didn't really read them because I figured they're private. I just scan them for anything I should report related to safety and then throw them away." I was both proud and disappointed.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
When I was 14, I was hormonally out of control and obsessed with the act of whoopee. I guess like everyone else. I was messaging this girl online and I was supposed to go over to her house that week. Obviously, the doing of the deed was being talked about. Well, I was passing a note to one of my friends about being scared of the protection breaking, and I figured that was the last of that note until I got back from spring break. I was called to the guidance counselor. She said an anonymous teacher gave her the note. Turns out the note fell out of the kid's backpack and was picked up by another student. That kid gave it to a teacher, and she gave it to the counselor. Needless to say, there was an awkward talk about doing the deed with my hot, fresh out of college guidance counselor. This is why you don't sign your notes. My friends and I were clandestinely doing a Mad Lib in AP English, and our teacher confiscated it. She read the first sentence and couldn't help but laugh a little bit. It was something like, "Dear Mom, Terry Schiavo won't stop waxing my butt." I sent a student to the restroom. I knew he really had to go because I'd initially said no. Admin said no bathroom passes, don't chew my butt out for that. And he looked to be in tears at his desk the whole time afterwards. So I went over to his desk and told him to go. He rushed out. So I was really confused when he came back less than a minute later and sat back down. There was no way he could have used the restroom. He immediately began scribbling a note. I waited for him to pass it and then intercepted it and read it. The class was chanting, "Read it out loud, read it out loud." But I couldn't. It had said, "I just walked in on 2 people doing the deed in the bathroom." I didn't want to call the office to tell them because I knew if the rest of the class found out, and they would be listening, the class would be out of control. So I pulled a different teacher out of her class from across the hall, told her the situation so she could keep an eye on my class, and sprinted to the bathroom. They were already gone. I went ahead and called the office and they were able to look in on the security camera and catch them going in and out. Busted. Oh, and my poor kid never got to pee. I teach at a high school in Tokyo. I walked past a boy student passing a piece of paper to a girl student. I grabbed it. On that paper was an amazingly detailed drawing of some kind of sun monster with numerous sun tentacles perturbing out. At the end of each of these appendages were male anatomy heads and mushrooms. The boy looked at me with a grin and asked if I could tell which ones were men's organs and which ones were mushrooms. I laughed and handed it to the girl it was being passed to and told her to enjoy. My IT teacher once told us a story of a student that had drawn a caricature of the teacher being fat, which the teacher kinda was. He gave the kid $20 and still has it hanging on his fridge. Not really an intercepted note, but in my freshman English class, I dropped a few papers out of my notebook, and the teacher caught me picking them up. Then she had me read my note aloud, saying something like, "We don't pass notes in my class. If you can't say something out loud, then it doesn't belong here." So I read my past note. English quiz 1. Question 1. When Romeo, etc., etc. She stopped me before I could do the answer, and I was like, "Are you sure you don't want me to read the answer? I got a full 10 points for it." When I was a freshman in high school, I'd make graphic comics about the adventures of Eggplant Boy and Hoo-Ha Girl. One day, John dropped the note and the hottest girl in my grade picked it up. She laughed her butt off. I was in the 8th grade and in religion class. The teacher was talking about confessionals and I was reminded of a scene from South Park when someone, I'm not sure who, had whoopee in one of the booths. Since I wasn't a good artist, I decided to draw 3 stick figures railing each other. I passed it to my friend and the teacher confiscated it and then told the principal. I was given Saturday detention, which entailed me paying $10 to the teacher and having to wipe down her desks for 4 hours. Wait, teachers can fine their kids as part of detention and pocket the money? It says here that you paid directly to the teacher. Holy crap! I need to become a substitute and get in on this corrupt gravy train. So long, YouTube. Actually, no, I don't want to deal with kids. I'm going to keep this job. Yeah. Freshman year, in my study hall, a friend and I were passing a note back and forth, calling each other a number of names and specific racial slurs. Then the teacher finally noticed and took the note. After that, all of the other students were saying that he should read it out loud. He said that there was no part of the note that he would even think about reading in public, and we were both suspended for a week. Back in high school, one of my friends, we'll call him Note Passer, was behind on the cell phone curve. He had one, but it didn't have texting and was only supposed to be for emergencies. Anyways, this led to him passing notes around class to communicate with his friends that weren't sitting directly near him. He'd started talking to this one girl he'd liked forever, they'd been assigned a class project together in another class, and he definitely had no chance with her. She wasn't stuck up or anything, she was just unbelievably beautiful, so most guys knew they had no chance with her. And my friend, as well as much of our group, was much more on the average level. This girl was one of those girls that actually makes you stop and do a double take. Simply unbelievable. Anyways, my friend and I were sitting behind this girl in class when I received a note passed from Note Passer from across the classroom. I opened it, thinking it was to me, only to read that it was for the girl in front of me, the unbelievably gorgeous one, if you'll recall. It was some lame question about when would be a good time to get together to work on the project. My friend and I said that this wouldn't fly. So as the note passer sat there and looked on in horror from across the classroom, we crumpled up his note and started writing our own. It was this sprawling love poem which started out as a joke, just a little way to mess with our friend, but then it actually started getting good. Really good. We didn't really think anything more of it until, barely containing our laughter, we passed it forward to the girl in front of us. A poem not written by Note Passer, but with Note Passer's name on it. Note Passer's eyes declared death, while ours declared hilarity. After about 5 minutes of nothing, we figured the girl had just written it off as the joke it was, or had declared Note Passer a creep. Either way, we were going to explain that it was a joke to her after class. We were shocked when she reached back and planted a note on my desk. With shaking hands, I opened it. It said, That is the single sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me. That's it. Just one simple sentence, and words could not explain the goldmine we had just struck for our friend who was ready to murder us the second the bell rang. Quietly and slowly, we wanted to make it seem like the note had been passed all the way there, then a new one written and passed all the way back. My friend and I hatched the beginning of a relationship through pen and paper for note passer. We kept up the poetic tone for a few notes and then asked if she'd like to go to the homecoming game or dance. All of this was still under the note passer's name, of course. She said yes, and explained that no one had ever asked her to a dance before. Later we'd learn that she was rarely asked anywhere simply because 99% of guys thought they had no chance with her. With class time running low, we sent a brief message to Notepasser outlining what had just happened, to at least trust us until after we could explain more, and that if she comes up to him before we could talk to him, to keep his stupid mouth closed as much as possible, to not show her any of his handwriting, and to not try to refer to what was written in the notes, as he had no clue what the heck they said. He gave us this stunned look when the bell rang, and remained planted in his seat when he saw that the gorgeous girl was coming over to him. She said she forgot to give him her phone number in the last note, and that he should have it so that they could coordinate times and crap before the game and dance. This was like 2 days before. Everything went well, they're still dating and in a long-term and committed relationship, and she has no clue that those original notes were from us. I guess she just never compared the handwriting, even though Notepasser and I do have pretty similar handwriting. In short, hijacked my friend's note and hooked him up with the most beautiful girl in the school. When I was in secondary school, high school but we started a younger age, I was in first year when I would have been 11 or 12. We had this maths teacher who was a bit of a weirdo. She always stared at me when talking to the class in general, which was quite unnerving. As a class, we liked to mess with her a bit. Stupid things like dropping our pens all at the same time. So one day, a note was being passed around the class saying, "Everyone drop your pens at 12 sharp. Love, Katie." When it was my turn to pass the note along, I waited until the teacher had turned to the blackboard and threw it to the next person. Mid-throw, the teacher decided to turn around, and of course her eyes went directly to me, as per usual. She confiscated the note and brought it to her desk. Katie was freaking out as it wasn't actually her who wrote it, it had been her friend Liz. So Liz asked the teacher if she could go to the restroom. In our school, we had to go get our journal signed if we wanted to go to the restroom during class time. So Liz went up to the teacher's desk and placed the journal on top of the note while the teacher signed it, and then she took both the note and the journal with her to the restroom. The teacher didn't even have a clue. A couple of minutes later, the teacher started to look for the note, asked us if we'd seen it. She checked under her desk, asked Liz when she came back from the restroom if she'd seen it, but then it was never found and she never got to see its contents. The relief we felt as a class was awesome. In short, got caught passing a note, managed to get the note back without the teacher reading it. Had some criminals in class, and nowadays a majority of them are in prison. Anyway, one day one of them passed a note saying, "Meet me with the stuff at 8, or something along those lines to another one, and the teacher, of course, intercepted it. Not being the smartest girl, plus being new in school, she read it in front of the class and laughed at these guys. That same teacher was jumped by some, quote, strangers later that day and got her nose broken. Oof. Had a science teacher who confiscated a note that this messed up boy had written to this girl who had just broken up with him. The teacher read it aloud to the whole class. It was full of personal information and was very emotional. Everyone laughed at him and the boy was humiliated. Turns out, giving everyone an open season pass to bully someone who's already in a pretty bad place isn't a great idea. That took a dark turn afterwards, and the teacher was fired as a result of some of the stuff that happened. What depressing meal made you want to give up on everything? Christmas Eve, I was working late. Broke and tired, I had a gas station cheeseburger and chips that was on sale because those items were about to expire. When I called to say hello to my mother, she mentioned how she gave some prime rib to her dog. I bought a discounted cake at the grocery store that had Happy Anniversary Anna still visible in the indentation, even though most of the frosting had been scraped off. I got drunk and ate it alone. I kept a tough schedule as a college student, and I remember one night I was working my part-time job in the library. The shift was from 5 through 9 p.m., and I had classes all morning and my internship all afternoon. At some point during my shift, I realized I hadn't actually eaten all day and managed to scrounge an old, flattened granola bar from my bag. I couldn't take a break and I wasn't allowed to eat at the desk, so I hid under a bin of DVDs and scarfed down that disgusting dry oat patty like a feral raccoon, enjoying a snack under a dumpster. Not my finest moment or meal. The last thing my mother ever cooked me. I ate it almost a week after she died. I didn't want to waste it, but I knew that once I ate it, she'd really be gone. The pain never goes away, it just gets smaller and smaller until you can shove it away and it doesn't sit on you anymore. It's my birthday today, and I am eating a corn dog that I just cooked in the microwave. Alone, naturally. A tortilla topped with ketchup and mustard. Don't judge me. Dry oatmeal, the Quaker brand that comes in the little brown packets. I couldn't be bothered to heat it up or even add water, so I just ate it straight out the packet. On my 21st birthday, I'm now 62, I had a coupon for a free sundae at Farrell's. I went there by myself to enjoy my ice cream, but they bought it out in full regalia with Happy Birthday playing and singing together, and now everyone was looking at me sitting all by myself with my scoop of plain vanilla. I mean, I guess it was free. I still think I would have been mortified enough to lose my appetite at that point. The social judgment from around me probably would have stopped me from being able to enjoy that meal. But yeah, like you said, free calories. At 24 years old, went to stay with my fiancée and her family for Christmas. She dumped me on Christmas morning because reasons. I lived about 90 minutes away in another town. I went home, no dog because it was in the kennels for the holidays because I was meant to be away. Flatmates were away. Family are all out of town on holiday. Christmas dinner was leftovers from the back of the fridge, alone, not even any booze to numb the pain. Worst meal of my life. I didn't have it, but my dad had a Whopper on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on Thanksgiving Day because he couldn't attend the nice Thanksgiving dinner because he forgot his blazer. I once talked to this girl online dating for quite a while. She told me to meet her at a pub, but then she texted she was running late so she had me order for her, so I did. But then never showed after I waited with food on the table for about 30 minutes. So I ate her Caesar wrap the next day for lunch, at home, by myself, and never heard from her again. So I'll just assume she was hit by a bus, even though my town doesn't have buses. 2015 was a pretty rough year for me. I left a job I enjoy for a risky new position at a startup. It was a good company, but the project I was working on was mismanaged from the start. No guidance, no proper planning, no heads up about lack of said planning, and it all fell on me. Days turned into weeks without a day off, 14-hour days, and every time I asked for more resources or help, I was denied. Eventually, it got to a point where I couldn't run what I was put in charge of, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I ended up quitting and survived on a bit of savings. Once that started to run out, I tried to take a much lower level job, which was terrible. I suffer from anxiety and have bouts of gloominess. Read depression. And it had gone untreated, so it crescendoed to when I just quit that job as well. I moved out of my apartment and had to move back in with my mother for a while, on New Year's Day 2016. My brain knew somewhere that I would make it out of this, but the question was when. Apologizing for the hyperbole up front, I felt like a victim with a bullet wound in an ambulance. I knew I was safe, I was where I needed to be and heading to the right place, but holy crap, there was a chance I might not make it in time. During those turbulent few months, the woman I loved, and I mean disgusting, pathetic, putrid pink loved, ended things with me after a year of quasi-are-we-actually-a-couple dating. I was in pieces. No job, no love, no real friends who weren't busy with their own lives aside from the occasional, "How are you?" text. My sleep schedule was off. I was up all night and asleep all day. I watched terrible TV shows on a couch while I watched the days of my life crash by a second at a time. I started feeling insane, hurt, not having work. I called every job I saw a listing for, dozens of them if not more. Eventually, I found an old email for someone I worked with once at that first job that I enjoyed. He was in California and offered to help me get a position out there, which did work out. I loved my home, my city, and even this lady still. I knew that staying there wasn't intelligent if it was for someone else who didn't love me back. She even encouraged me to go. She told me I'd be better off not being around her for a while. I accepted the job and bought a plane ticket. My mum dropped me off at the airport crying. She just wanted me to be happy. I'm not usually happy. I felt like I was saying goodbye to a whole chunk of my adult life that I just wanted to get back so desperately. I went through security, checked in, and found the gate. I hadn't eaten in a day or so, so I decided to sit down and have some Burger King before I boarded in an hour or so. I bought a spicy chicken sandwich with fries and a soda. I pulled up my carry-on to the table, sat down, and opened up the food. All I was thinking about was her. This was it. I was leaving. I'm not coming back, at least not for a while. If she called me at 2 a.m. in a week and wanted to see me, I just couldn't go see her. As I slowly ate the food that I wasn't even really in the mood for, she texted me, "Have a good trip." For some reason, that set me off. I just stopped eating and started crying. I was making a mistake. I should go home now. I should go to her door and make one last effort. It would be great. Don't get on the plane. Don't get on the plane. I sipped my soda. Don't get on the plane. A few minutes later, I threw my trash out and walked to the gate. When they started boarding, I got on the plane. It took off. I left. I spent 2016 in California. I made new friends. I got to see some amazing things, and I, as cheesy as it sounds, worked on myself. I grew to enjoy California very much over time. However, I still missed my hometown, and eventually last month I realized that I wanted to come home. Not because of fear or because of her, but because I just felt like I wanted more time with my home city. I missed the streets, the architecture, the people, the food. It was when I realized this is why I wanted to come home that I decided to. My company was very understanding and helpful in securing a transfer. I'm back in my home city now, working the job I had before all of this happened. I'm glad I get to see my friends, and yeah, it turns out I do have a lot of friends, but you can never see that when you feel like I did back then. I still think about her sometimes, but I haven't talked to her or seen her since I got back. I feel no need. Things get better. But that was a terrible Burger King value meal. In short, got dumped, left 2 jobs, had no money, moved back with my mum, decided to move to California and leave everything I loved behind, ate some depressing tear-covered French fries at the airport, and things got better. Bologna sandwich in jail. I love that we had a long story in which the food was really just the watershed moment and we got to see the full exhaustive before and after context, and then it was followed by a 4-word sandwich story where I think a bit of context would have very much sated some of our curiosity about how that meal came to pass. Let's get some balance here, people. My 25th birthday. It was 1977 and the whole country was in the midst of the energy crisis. So that Friday, Carter had ordered offices closed and only heated to 35 degrees. Everyone got a day off. But my new boss had a big trial going on in Washington, D.C. and needed me to go into the office long enough to transcribe tapes he was having flown in that a cab driver would deliver from the airport. It was 2 degrees outside and there was a couple of feet of snow on the ground, and the bus I took to work, an hour-long trip by the way, had no heat. Only one security guard was in the building when I got there, and I typed the brief as fast as I could when it finally arrived, after I'd sat there freezing for 2 hours. All through this, I knew my family was preparing a great dinner for me, so as soon as I was done, things would be nice. Ham, mashed potatoes, cauliflower with cheese sauce, and angel food cake. Left the office, and the bus back home not only didn't have heat, it had some of the windows stuck open. Shivering all the way home, I dreamed of the great dinner I'd soon have. I got to my mother's and it turned out she and my dad had had a massive fight, and then she and my snotty teenage sister had their bags packed and planned on coming home with me. No dinner was cooked or even anticipated. We got carry-out chili and went back to my apartment where my sister fussed about everything, insulted me all evening and proceeded to remove all of my dishes from the cabinets and rewash them because she wasn't sure they were clean enough to suit her. Mother sat and cried. Turned out Dad was running around on her, and this was the first of several weekends where he'd pick a fight and storm off on a Friday and stay gone all weekend. Worst birthday ever. I was fed dog food for a while as a kid. Sitting with the kids, laughing about their day, encouraging them to eat their dinner so they'll have energy tomorrow. And then, after they're in bed, eating the leftovers off their plates and filling up on tap water because I didn't have enough money to feed all of us, and I wanted to protect them from knowing that I'd failed as a parent. The very fact that they ate dinner that night is evidence that you didn't fail. You sacrificed for your children, and that's exactly what a good parent does. Times can be tough, very, very tough, and when times are that tough, what separates the good parents from the failed ones is who the parents put first. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Unlimited pancakes at IHOP. I took a bet that I couldn't finish 20 pancakes for $150. I started regretting that bet on number 7 or 8. New Year's Eve between 2013 and 2014. McDonald's, eaten by me, my uncle, my parents, and a neighbor in a house with a dying man. My grandfather was dying of end-stage liver cirrhosis, Parkinson's, and a blood clot. He was on hospice care in his own home. We couldn't afford a full-time caregiver, so me and my uncle were voluntold to care for him as he died. New Year's rolls around, we share a depressing meal together and try to be of good cheer, but it didn't work. I was an escort, and I'd usually try to get in and out on my way home. I usually felt really dirty sitting in the booth by myself, but the worst time was when I was hired by 2 guys, and after we did the deed, they went and got me Wendy's, which I proceeded to eat undressed at the foot of a dirty motel bed, while those 2 creeps stared at me. Every Valentine's Day, I order and eat a whole pizza while watching Eternal Sunshine. I ate a huge bag of raisins for 3 days because that's all I had. One time in college, I was returning to my dorm room late at night, and I was really hungry, but I didn't have any cash for the vending machine, nor any means of transportation to the nearest food joint. Sure enough, there was a pizza box sitting atop the trash can in the hallway, the box not being big enough for the can. I opened it and I found 2 entire slices of pepperoni pizza, which I ate then and there. It filled me up, but I felt like a damn hobo. I was invited to Thanksgiving dinner at my brother's house. His wife asked me to bring crescent rolls. I was having a hard time financially that year, and my long-term boyfriend had recently been diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. At the time, I had about $3 to my name. I couldn't afford crescent rolls, so I bought 2 packs of Kroger Brown and Serve rolls for $1.99. My sister-in-law was quite visibly annoyed and kept mentioning all day long how much she was craving crescent rolls. Driving back from Disney World, eating a fabulous dinner of fresh shrimp, oysters, and fish overlooking the sun setting on Panama City Bay, while the entire family of 6 all silently sobbed at the table because we were just told the family dog of 13 years died. We miss you, Maggie. Or there was that one time mac and cheese made with only water and 1 bag of popcorn. That had to last a week until Mum got food stamps. Both sad for different reasons, and they make me thankful for the life and love that I now have. I ate a $5 pizza at 10:30 at night in the floor of an empty room that had earlier been a bedroom. We were sitting on cot mattresses, and it was the last night we had in the house before we had to be out. It was the day after Christmas. A sad potato smiley. I don't know if the word sad was just the adjective used to describe how this meal made this person feel, or if there are potato smileys that actually do look sad. Because the former is indeed not a great meal, but the idea that kids can be contemplating that their food doesn't want to be eaten is quite horrifying to a certain type of personality. Ran out of food in my apartment and didn't feel like going shopping since it was 1 a.m. Found taco shells which I promptly heated in the oven, then topped them with peanut butter. During basic training in the army, we were doing our first week under full field conditions. To get our food, we had to sneak up to a position and steal our combat rations. The combat rations in the IDF are pretty crappy, but there were some dried fruit pieces and olives and stuff that could be pleasant. The only truly gross thing that no one would eat was the canned meat, and meat is in big questionable quotation marks. We stole our food and got ready to eat when we noticed the box had been tampered with. Our sergeant had gone and pulled everything out except the canned meat. I put the ketchup and mustard on a hot dog bun and ate it with no hot dog once. It's like the last bite, but for the whole thing. I was super depressed and ate an entire box of off-brand mac and cheese raw with nothing but a cool glass of water and a steady flow of tears to wash it down. Good times. The last lasagna made by my stepmom. She was adorable, sweet, and always treated me like one of her own, always making sure I had enough food since I lived 2 cities away. Their house was too small and my dad spent half the time there, and half the time at my house where I was a teen, since it would take him 3 hours to get to work from my place versus hers, 20 minutes. She died on a drive-by shootout on a night I was supposed to go join them for dinner. I gave them a maybe and ended up spending the night at my boyfriend's, ignoring my phone lighting up because we were doing the deed, and when I was done, went for my phone, got the news, and was in shock. Just walked out to the living room, totally undressed, where my then boyfriend's roommate and his date were watching a movie in the middle of the night. Went for the bathroom, took a cold shower to get ready to handle everything, completely oblivious to the fact that I just flashed them both when I walked by. Thanksgiving dinner alone in a Waffle House 2,000 miles from my family. When you're alone on Thanksgiving, Waffle House is your family. Tortilla wrap with Kraft singles. I threw in some uncooked ramen noodles for the crunch factor. It's the poor man's equivalent to the crispy chicken wraps that pretty much every restaurant does now, except it had no chicken, just chicken flavoring from the noodles. I remember how we got our first microwave when I was little. I was so excited because I loved melted cheese on top of a piece of bread. Well, we didn't have any bread that day, and for some reason I didn't even use a plate. But I just put a slice of cheese inside the microwave and used a knife to get the cheese out and ate it. 9 out of 10 would recommend. I was living with my parents after college and had a hankering for Peking duck. I spent the weekend getting the duck, buying the equipment to correctly hang it in preparation, basting the skin with honey, making the little pancakes by hand. It wasn't until I took it out of the oven that I realized I had no one to share it with. I sat by myself in the dimly lit kitchen and could only eat a few bites before I was so disgusted with myself that I threw the rest away. 2 months later, I moved across the country and started a new life. To this day, I still hate Peking duck. My wife doesn't like Famous Dave's and she was gone one weekend, so know what I got? Famous Dave's. I sat waiting, game for my barbecue goodness to take home, talking to the person about how I never get it and all. I got home and dig in and it's pretty bad. So disappointed and let down. In short, the Famous Dave's in Rochester, Maine isn't that good. Christmas in New York City. Too broke and not enough vacation to travel and no friends in the city yet. The holiday consisted of a couple of days' worth of Little Caesars and whiskey. Canned tuna mixed with mayonnaise packets from some fast food place and sriracha on saltine crackers. I actually like it, and I don't eat it because I'm poor, but after I told my mum that's what I was eating during a phone call, all the presents I got for birthdays and Christmas is food-related. Well, I guess I don't mind, and I still have a crap load of Pepperidge Farm sausages and cheeses she sent me for Christmas. When I was a kid, we had a Thanksgiving dinner in the hospital cafeteria where my dad was working late. I was one sad little camper. I had only a little money left for the last week of the month, so I just picked up some cheap veggies to cook with some mince that I already had. The intention was to cook a large meal to last for the whole week. Well, I had a brain toot and forgot to brown the mince before I mixed in a whole lot of liquid, so I ended up just having to boil this watered-down mince until it was cooked enough for me to eat. It was really gross, and it was all I had for that week. My flatmates all made fun of me. I went to a high-end restaurant, $30 for pasta with peas. My fault for thinking there was more to it, I guess. A McDonald's salad. Hot chocolate powder from the packet scooped out with a spoon. I thought this was for depressing stories, not delicious ones. A salad. I had to lose a few pounds, and I didn't know yet that dieting is focused more on eating the right food and in regulation, and that it didn't mean starvation and depriving myself of the good stuff. I sat there chewing my greens, feeling like a miserable cow grazing alone in a pasture. I work at a diner-like thing, and we're able to eat leftover stuff that's either too small to serve or something like leftover fries. I once had a lunch that consisted of half a mozzarella stick and 2 fries. Oh boy, the minimum wage special. I'd say it never gets old, but it really, really does. Alarmingly quickly, actually. A sheet of paper. And no, I'm not kidding. Probably every meal I've been eating since I moved to a different country for work. I don't know anyone here, so most of my meals are eaten alone. Breakfast on the train to work or at my office desk, since I don't have time in the morning to eat it at home. Lunch mostly alone, since I'm not close with anyone at work. Dinner alone at home, since me and my housemates get off from work at different times, and I'm not close with them either. I miss the days when I looked forward to eating a home-cooked meal shared with my family back home. Killed a goat in Afghanistan. Platoon leader was killed. Ate the goat. Lots of people sad. Plain toast and applesauce, which I later threw up. I love the stomach flu. When I ordered some awesome udon noodles like 5 minutes before the "It's not you, it's me" speech began. I went camping and woke up extremely hungover one morning. I was starving but really didn't want to try and cook anything, so I settled for canned chicken breast and crackers. It was terrible. The smell of the chicken juice should have been my first warning. What was the most epic "I rest my case" moment that a lawyer got to dish out? I was on the losing end of this one. I was representing a pro bono defendant who was attempting to regain custody of her children. The family division attorney was laying out his case to the judge for why my client wasn't ready, and his final point was that my client had refused emotional counseling to avoid violent fits of rage that she had inflicted on her children. On cue, my client jumps up screaming, "Frick you, judge lady, you stupid frickin' C-word! Frick y'all for taking my frickin' kids, you frickin' C-words!" I just caught the opposing attorney's smirk of satisfaction as I got up to usher my client out of the courtroom. I was prosecuting some kid. He had an antisocial behavior order, which meant that he was not supposed to go to a certain street. He'd pled not guilty on the basis that he hadn't been there. I opened my cross-examination by holding up a map and pointing at the street. I said to him, "You went here, didn't you?" He said, "Yes." In England, we don't say, "I rest my case." Instead, I looked up at the bench and said, "No further questions," and sat down. It might not seem epic, but I got the defendant to admit the offense with one question. That never happens. Opposing counsel decided that I'd coached my witness and gave him lines to repeat, that he was lying. Short version is that he asked the witness if he spoke to me before he testified. The witness said that he had spoken to me. The attorney looked like he thought he had me. The attorney asked the witness what I told him and what instructions I gave him. Witness looked him dead in the eye and said, "The first thing he told me was to tell the truth no matter what. He said the lawyer's never the one who goes to jail, that he isn't going to go to jail for me, and if I lie, I'm on my own." The attorney looked like someone had taken the air out of him. Everyone in the courtroom simultaneously looked at me. Only time I've ever smirked or laughed in court. I wanted to put my feet up on the table like I was Vincent LaGuardia Gambini, hands behind my head, and say, "I'm done with this guy." Yeah, it's nice to know that people who practice law are still prone to the same bouts of being confidently wrong that you see in other professions. They just get paid more for it. I had a trial against a guy who was self-representing, and he was constantly asking my client about conversations she had had with me. First of all, no, I'm not coaching her to lie, and second of all, there's a thing called privilege, which means the things we discuss aren't compellable. It was an exhausting trial. Needless to say, he was ordered to pay about $1 million more than he actually owed. Not a case-winning moment, but a motion-winning one for sure. Think of cases like a big conflict, with motion hearings as little conflicts. Opposing attorney was insisting that Rule A meant that they could do X. I tried multiple times to point out that Rule A literally didn't say that. During the hearing, the judge reached behind them, grabbed their rules of civil procedure, basically dictionary of rules, placed it in front of the other attorney and said, "Show me where Rule A says X." The other attorney didn't take the hint, read the rules out loud for a brutal 5 minutes, and gave the book back. I said, "Judge, I have nothing to add." It was pretty fun. When I was in law school, I had to argue a case for an exam. I was the last in my class to go, so there wasn't anyone arguing against me. I opened with a motion to dismiss since opposing had failed to show up. The judge grading me chuckled and said, "Touché, counsel." I still had to go forward, but we got off on the right foot and I ended up with an A. Corporate lawyer, so I don't have cases to rest, but once opposing counsel was forcefully insisting that it was ridiculous for me to expect a certain provision in a contract we were negotiating, and I pointed out that this provision was standard in his own firm's contract forms, as I knew from several prior transactions I'd worked on across from them. Pretty exciting stuff. He took it in stride and said jokingly, "Well, of course it's fine when we ask for it." I represented a company that was sued for breach of contract by a former independent contractor. The guy was basically alleging that my client wasn't paying him correctly in accordance with the contract. During his deposition, the guy admits that he'd never reviewed any documents to make sure his allegations were true, never reviewed his complaint before filing it to make sure the allegations in it were true, and had no idea whether or not my client actually failed to pay him in accordance with the contract. Basically, he tells me that he was suing my client because he didn't think their agreement was fair, even though he agreed to the terms when he signed the contract. The kicker is that he admitted that he owed my client money. At arbitration, he tries to flip his story and started giving testimony that's the exact opposite of his deposition, so I whip out his transcript and undermine his testimony bit by bit. Needless to say, I won that case. Defendant in a bench trial for a speeding ticket said he couldn't possibly go as fast as the officer clocked him. He knew this because he videotaped himself accelerating from full stop to the location where the officer sat. His experiment showed his vehicle could only get to 55 miles per hour and not the 67 he was clocked at. The ADA then moved to have another speeding ticket issued because the actual posted speed limit was 50 miles per hour. 5 miles per hour over is probably just a fine and a few points. 17 over is possibly reckless driving depending on the officer's discretion, so I don't think he was being too dumb. Oh, this was during sentencing. Mr. Defendant, they were a local boss gang, you stated you are not and have never been in a gang. That's correct. Do you have any tattoos? Yeah, I have a tiger on my calf and one on my chest that says GD for life. And what does GD stand for? Gangster Disciples, but I mean, no further questions, Your Honor. Complaining witness accused my client of stalking. Said she told him numerous times that she wanted nothing to do with him. My client claimed they were dating, but whenever she got mad at him, she'd call the cops and say he was stalking her. On the stand, she had testified that she had never dated him, never invited him into her home, wanted nothing to do with him. She presented a photo on her phone of him sitting on her porch to prove that he'd come to her property. I asked the judge's permission to look at the photos before and after the porch photo for context. Girl had dozens of photos of the guy who was clearly her boyfriend. I showed her one such picture. So this is Mr. So-and-so, right? Yes. In this photo, he's on a bed. Yes. This bed is yours? Yes. This bed is in your bedroom? Yes. You took this photo of him? Yes. He's smiling in this photo, right? Yes. And in this photo, he's wearing your brassiere? Yes. No further questions, Your Honor. My sister got T-boned by a car, causing a concussion when I was younger. Long story short, we were in court with the judge who asked the driver if he'd ever sped before. No, Your Honor, I never speed, was his reply. The judge asked him a couple more times if he was sure if he'd never sped, ever. The driver was adamant that he never sped and never had before. A few minutes later, my sister's lawyer gave the judge some paperwork. The judge read it and said to the driver, "It seems that you have some past driving violations. Can you tell me what they're for?" Long silence and stupid face followed by, "Speeding, Your Honor." The driver had to pay medical bills for my sister. It either takes a man with a complete lack of faith in the legal system or an absolute moron to go in with that much of a bald-faced lie and think he could just walk himself out of trouble that way. I was in traffic court one time and saw a lawyer straight up murder a cop with his words. The cop had previously testified that the weather on the night of the traffic stop was heavy rain and winds, so strong that the defendant could only open his window 3 inches, and that the car had stopped in an area with very little shoulder, forcing the cop to approach from the passenger side and not the driver's side. The cop had then testified that he smelled a strong smell of alcohol on the defendant's breath. When the defense lawyer got up, he repeated what the cop had said almost verbatim and asked how he could have possibly smelled alcohol on the breath of someone on the other side of the car, through a 3-inch crack in the window on a night with pouring rain and strong winds. The cop sort of opened and shut his mouth a few times, squirmed around in his seat and said, "That's just what I always write in my log to remind me that it was a DUI stop." The judge threw the case out. No motion to dismiss needed. Then he took a break and called the traffic prosecutor and the cop into his office. I'm guessing it wasn't for a nice spot of tea and some scones. I'm relatively junior, so I'm hoping to beat this one day. I defend professionals and brought a motion to dismiss case on the basis that the plaintiff couldn't prove my client was negligent as she had not served the required expert evidence. As opposing counsel and I waited for our motion to be heard, we were sitting in the courtroom. The judge, who I didn't know and who hadn't read our materials, wanted to talk to the parties of a short trial, which was to be heard after our motion was argued. The matter was also a professional negligence matter and the plaintiffs had no expert support. The judge then spent 10 minutes explaining that he'd practiced in professional negligence for many years and was well versed in the evidentiary requirements to prove the elements of professional negligence. In fact, he said, "I very rarely use the word impossible in this courtroom, but it is impossible for you to be successful without expert evidence." Our matter was then called, and I revelled in explaining to the judge that he was about to hear a motion to dismiss a professional negligence case on the basis that the client had no expert evidence. I won. I do mostly solicitor work, so if I'm doing my job right, I don't get a whole bunch of these kinds of moments. That being said, I had a long-time client who was being sued, and I got to shut down the guy suing him in a very satisfying way. So my client had hired a guy who we'll call Kevin as basically a right-hand man for this company. The employment contract wasn't done yet, but they had an agreement that Kevin would work 6 weeks at a lower wage, and then sign the contract and get the agreed-upon wage. So the guy works decently for 5 weeks and then is given the contract to sign. He comes back to the owner, my client, and says that he has some small changes he'd like to make. When the owner gets the contract back, he finds that the small changes involve removing the duties and responsibilities section, basically the job description, and the non-compete and confidentiality clause. Not only that, but he's written in a higher salary than agreed and added a bunch new benefits for himself. Obviously, my client tells him that he can either sign the contract as it was originally laid out, or he can find himself another job. The guy takes the latter option, but he starts a lawsuit against the owner wanting to be paid for the 6 weeks he was supposed to work, which had already been paid, 2 weeks in lieu of notice, and 5 weeks vacation pay. I got the enjoyable job of telling Kevin, in front of a judge, that he wasn't entitled to anything under the employment legislation, and the only way he could get any of that would be if he'd signed the contract. The judge dismissed the case and awarded costs to the defendant, but not before giving Kevin a lecture on wasting the court's time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had a case where opposing counsel was cross-examining our expert witness on hydrology regarding some silt and runoff issues. Mr. Smith, wouldn't you agree that the book I'm holding is highly respected in your field and considered to be the gold standard on the subject? The witness said, I'm aware that it's highly regarded in my field. Would you be willing to explain in your own words what paragraphs 6 through 10 on page 121 is describing? The witness reads the passage word for word. Yes, I can read, but could you put this passage in your own words for the court? These are my words. I wrote this guide. We were the defendants. We were being sued by an HOA over silt in a lake. We were able to prove that we weren't responsible and prevailed. It actually originated from another site and entered the lake elsewhere. However, that site was owned by a very large corporation, and I don't think the HOA wanted to fight with an entity that could fight forever in court. HOA vs. megacorporations, when a slimy force meets an immoral object. It's the kind of battle you don't have to feel bad watching because you know that either way, some garbage people are going to lose. That said, I guess all the money's going to lawyers on the end, and it would be better if the silt wasn't in the water. Oh well. Intellectual property lawyer. Deep in a set of terms and conditions on a website, our client's details, like his name and contact stuff, were listed. So it's very evident they just copy-pasted our client's legal terms and conditions and missed a couple of details that they needed to change. I was handed the matter, did a quick Control-F for client details, and it was an open and shut case. Not really that impressive, but it saved me hours of time going through each term one after the other, noting exact similarities for a letter of demand. It was 30 years ago, and I still hope to see its like again. I'm on jury duty, we have to sit. The charge is arson. Supposedly, a farmer burned down his barn for insurance money. The prosecutor outlines what they'll prove, that the farmer moved most of the stuff out of the barn into a second barn, then burned down the first barn by pouring fuel, diesel, around the base and setting fire to it to collect insurance on it. Prosecution calls a witness, a neighbor in a subdivision that backed up to the farm who testifies the farmer moved stuff out of the barn over about a week. The neighbor noticed the unusual activity because he was outside building a deck on his vacation. Next, the neighbor saw the farmer walking slowly around the outside of the barn, pouring something from a blue gas can on the lower part of the barn walls. Farmer goes out of sight to the front of the barn, the flames erupt all along the base of said barn, neighbor calls 911. We hear the recorded 911 call in which the neighbor says the farmer has set fire to his barn. By the time the fire department arrives, 5 minutes later, the barn is fully involved and they just act to contain, which is essentially just standing by as they note the nearby ground has been closely mowed, evidently to prevent the spread of flame. The firemen say the flames spread with a rapidity that was out of place even in a wooden barn and they smelled petroleum. Fire investigator employed by the fire department, who came along specifically because of the "he set his barn on fire" report, says that it's definitely arson because of the clear marks on the ground where accelerant has burned, which still smelled of fuel after the fire died down. Police arrest the farmer and take him into the station. More investigators said that there was virtually nothing in the burned barn. There were some ruined tools or equipment, but that there was a good supply of items in the other barn that appeared to have been recently put in place, including some sitting on the grass that was still green underneath the box. Insurance company representative says the barn was insured. The defendant's lawyer says essentially nothing, no cross-examination. Defense calls the farmer, and the first question asked is, "Let's cut to the chase. Did you burn your barn down?" "Yep." "Why did you do it?" It was old and rotten and with termites. It was gonna fall down. Not safe. Huh. Do you usually burn down old farm buildings? Yep, and my daddy did that before me, and his before him. It's a farm. Are you aware that you need a permit to burn debris in this county? Been doing it that way on this farm since we had dangerous engines. Never had no permit. The fine is up to $50. Oh wait, I forgot. You're zoned active agriculture and are exempt. So no permit needed, but why didn't you tell any of this to the police? They didn't ask me no questions till they put handcuffs on me and took me to the police station. They told me anything I said would be used against me and said I had the right to remain silent. And then some lawyer guy came up and told me I was going to go to prison for insurance fraud, and he asked me questions. I remember Perry Mason said don't talk to anyone but your lawyer, so I didn't. Did you file an insurance claim? What for? The barn wasn't worth nothing in that state. That's why I burned it down in the first place. I suggested we explain all of this and try to talk them out of a trial. You said you wanted your day in court. What's up with that? They came on my land, arrested me without telling me what for, told me later it was for arson and insurance fraud and put that in the papers. All my friends, relatives, and neighbors know about this. They made me look dishonest. I want to make sure everyone knows the real facts. I figure this is better than them just dropping it and everyone wondering whether they just decided not to send an old man to prison. The defense rests. During a particularly nasty employment mediation hearing, I got to ask my former employer a question about payments per employment law. I said, did you or did you not pay into a state-mandated unemployment insurance fund for all of your employees past and present? Met by silence. The mediator asked, Sir, answer the question. Silence. Well, then let me ask it. Did you or did you not pay into state-mandated unemployment insurance fund for all of your employees past and present? Silence. All right, I'll take that as a no. In mediation, goodwill in entering into the process and answering relevant questions weighs heavily. They do say it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt, but I do feel that in this case the mouth should have been opened at least once, briefly, just to get the inevitable consequences done, rather than dragging the whole thing out. As a young attorney, I'd stated a claim that an insurance company was dragging out a case in bad faith in the hopes that my elderly client would die before they had to pay him. I was requesting that the trial date be given priority due to my client's advanced age. The judge was no spring chicken himself and seemed skeptical when he asked exactly how old my client was, maybe thinking that he was in his 70s and must merely seem ancient to a baby lawyer like me. When I responded that my client was 92 and the case had already gone on for 5 years, the judge was visibly shocked and immediately granted my motion for priority, shutting down the insurance company attorney's attempts to respond. They wrote us a check for $1 million the next week. I was representing a woman with a severe neck injury. Opposing counsel presented a test result that showed her cervical exam was normal. I felt almost bad when I pointed out he had the wrong cervical area in mind. The most memorable court scene I witnessed was 1968, Sacramento, California. I was waiting to be tried in traffic court, my usual speeding, before Earl Warren Jr., the son of the great Earl Warren of Supreme Court fame. The guy before me was being tried for reckless driving. When it got down to sentencing, Earl Warren Jr. ordered some nominal fine and that the defendant attend traffic school. The defendant got all upset and began ranting how he didn't need to go to traffic school. As the defendant slowed down, Earl Warren Jr. calmly stated, "Well, sir, I can't make you attend traffic school. I can only issue the order for you to attend. If I find out after 2 weeks you've not attended, I'll issue a warrant for your arrest and place you in county jail for 30 days. At the end of which I'll renew the order for you to attend traffic school. So we can keep you going in and out of jail until you decide to attend traffic school." The guy just grumbled and walked out of court. I don't know if he went. I certainly did when I got a similar sentence. It wasn't a trial, though we had one of those and I won it easily. It just always stuck with me because of how clearly the law supported my position to the point that it was inarguable otherwise, and also because of how ridiculous the claim of monetary damages was. A guy moved out of his apartment, turned in his keys, and then came back 15 days later demanding access so that he could retrieve belongings that he'd left behind, which at that point had been trashed. It was just some minor furniture-type items, a lampshade is the only thing I clearly remember, as well as a box of his college notebooks, like the notes he'd taken during class. He was furious and sued the landlord in small claims for $5,000, the state maximum, because his notebooks have such huge value apparently. They hired me and I responded, which moves the case out of small claims, which is just the way it works here. I know that this isn't the case for every state, but our rule is better than yours, end of story.
Moving out of small claims put him at a huge disadvantage because now he can't rely on the lax rules of small claims, so he goes out and hires an actual lawyer. The lawyer calls me to try and talk settlement. I know her pretty well, so I wasn't rude or anything, but I kinda scoffed and was like, no, that won't be happening, and I direct her attention to a particular state statute and then read it out loud to her. This statute, unlike everything else in the law, isn't overly long or wordy or hard to follow. It just says bluntly that when someone actually moves out and gives notice of this, items left after 10 days are abandoned, period, end of story. I could feel her deflate on the phone and encouraged her to dismiss the suit. She didn't. We proceeded to a short bench trial in district court that we won. Terrible people had stolen all of this little old lady's money, but their only evidence was a document in the bad person's handwriting that was allegedly dictated. It said September 2012. No day, just the month. Clearly the rogue had forged that when she found out about the lawsuit, and not remembering when she'd stolen it, she'd hoped she could guess within the month so that no one could challenge her. So I was questioning her about it. Exhibit B is the little old lady's bank record. I asked, now, that withdrawal at the bottom, is that the alleged gift? Yes. Can you read the date of that transaction for me? August 25th, 2012. Thank you.
When did you realize, oh, I've got to run for my life? Bad diesel fire at work. I saw the fireball billowing towards me, so I jumped in a pit. The fireball blew over me, and when it retreated, I got the heck out of Dodge. I got some gnarly third-degree burns, but I survived. What the frick? Do you work in Bowser's Castle? Well, it was an oil refinery, actually. A 500-pound hog got loose at the state fair and started charging right at me. I've never run so fast in my life. I was leaving for work at 5:30 a.m. while it was dark. I locked the inside door handle and walked out the door, pulling the door closed behind me. As I turned around to walk off the porch towards my car, I saw 4 men jump out of a van and start coming towards me. The street was otherwise empty. My heart was pounding and I felt panic start as I was digging in my big, messy purse for my keys to unlock the door and get back in my house. The whole time, I was just thinking they're going to grab me, shove me in the van, commit the unspeakable act on me, and kill me. I was able to get back in my house before they made it to me, but it scared the crap out of me. Turns out they were immigration officers looking for someone who used to live in our house, and that is standard practice for them if they think the suspect will run. After I graduated from college, I finally landed an interview with a guy who was starting his own company. The economy was crappy and I wanted a job. I went for an interview and quickly noticed that he double-locked the door behind me. It was a small office in a strip mall. I immediately started to panic and then realized that no one else was there. He had me sit down, and 2 questions into the interview, he tried to put his hand up my skirt. I was wearing a business skirt suit. I got up and ran, and thankfully was able to open the locks and get the heck out of there. My mum accompanied me to every interview after that for a while. And to clarify some things that people are asking and thinking, first, my mum didn't go with me into every interview after that. She'd go with me, make sure it was safe and that I felt safe, and then would wait outside. Second, I didn't report him because stupid me at the time thought it was my fault. When I ran into my car, I called my mum and she asked me not to tell my dad in fear that my dad would just straight up murder the guy. 3, that awful job interview was for an analyst role in Chicago, and finally, I am okay now. In the days after, I promised myself to never take that crap from anyone ever again, and I've kept that promise. You know, in a lot of the job interview videos we've made fun of the people who bring their parents to interviews. After reading this story, I think it's time to admit that there are situations where a limited degree of parental chauffeuring is actually reasonable. I was solo camping in the woods during a phase where I wanted to be a survival expert. I hiked out miles from any roads or buildings, built a shelter, and then hiked back the way I came. Less than a mile away from camp, I found a dead coyote, decapitated, gutted, and laid out like a sacrifice or something. The eyes were gouged out and it was strung across a big flat rock. A rock which I used as a marker on the way in, so I know it hadn't been there a day before. I ran out of there as fast as I could, knife at the ready, probably 10 miles back to my house. I still have no idea who would have done that, but I know I didn't want to run into them into the woods alone. Sounds like that day you were a survival expert. My friend and I met at Waffle House for lunch. A guy came into the restaurant looking for a piece of paper that he'd accidentally left on the table. The waitress didn't know where the paper was located and might have thrown it away. The guy got upset, saying the paper was important and he was going home to get his gat stored under his mattress. My friend and I quickly paid our check and got the heck out of the restaurant. When I was in high school in the early 80s, I saw a lot of heavy metal bands. I made a friend who could always get us backstage after the show. So Anvil played and we went backstage. All of a sudden, the lead singer said, "Okay, all of the girls, take off your clothes or get out." I got out. The rest of the girls stayed. I do feel the need to say that I met the other bands at the time and they were lovely people. The guys from AITA were very, very nice. The guys from Venom were very quiet and shy. No more name dropping from me, but I feel the need to stick up for my heavy metal boys who are all old now, including me. Let me just Google Anvil really quick. Oh boy, yeah, that's a hard pass for me. I was driving north on the I-65 in the middle of Indiana. The sky was getting dark, the wind was picking up, it started hailing. I turned on the radio to hear that a tornado was nearby. I determined it was behind me going from southwest to northeast and about to cross over the interstate. Other cars were driving slowly or pulling over because of the rain, and I was hauling butt to get away from there. I worked for an agency that helps people do their daily tasks for home healthcare. I had a man whose insurance prohibited personal care like showers, and he was very upset during my visit when I declined his request for bathing. I felt bad at first, but soon the man became very angry with me. He accused me of all kinds of things and started pacing around room to room like he was looking for something. Between that and his spit and yelling rage, I slipped out of the house and drove to a safer place. I reported the incident to my employer and later found out that this person is an unspeakable act offender. Who knows what he was planning that day? Maybe nothing, but I'm glad I left anyway. Always trust your instincts, people. A lot of people that I see are very physically capable but have difficulties in other areas of their lives. This was the only person I ever saw with this particular insurance and the only time that I've ever seen personal care prohibited. The agency background checks us, but not the people that we see. And we see a lot of people, and I imagine it's cost-related to just take them on good faith. My coworker actually ran the background check on this guy and showed me how. I started using the database after this incident to keep myself informed when I got suspicious. It's free and available online. I lived in South Everett, Washington for a couple of years. Was walking home from the bus stop to my apartment, which took me behind the Home Depot. Suddenly, a van starts following me. I hear the side door slide open and look behind me to see a man with the top half of his body hanging out of the slider door looking at me. I took off running towards my apartment, literally running as far as I could. The van started going faster. By chance, a guy was pulling out of the driveway of my apartment complex, sees me running for my life and stops. The van immediately turns around and speeds off. The guy asks if I'm okay. I ask him to just stay there and please watch me walk into my apartment, which was the building next to his. He did, thank God. I started carrying mace and a very large knife the next day. I was in a restaurant and they were using a propane tank to power an outdoor heater. Suddenly, the tank started to catch fire and I got out quickly because I thought it was going to explode. The staff turned the tank off and everyone laughed at me for overreacting, but damn, I got scared. You didn't overreact. If one of those tanks blows, they can shoot 30 feet into the air. I've seen it. Oh, what a wimp. You're afraid of an exploding propane tank. I was in Thailand back in 2010 on the Southern Islands after a full moon party. My friends and I were talking to two girls who invited us to play poker. We went and sat down with two German guys and two burly Thai guys full of tats and began to play. They were joking, friendly, and the buy-in was $10. We lost some pots, won some pots, and overall it was a happy experience. The Thai guys beat us, and on the last hand I managed to claw my chips back to about $8. My friend was looking tired, so I gave him the nod, thanked them for the game, and I said we'd cash out and be on our way. The Thai guys put a machete on the table and told us to F off. My friend, myself, and the two German guys noped out of that situation as fast as we could. On the way back, the girls caught up with us and apologized, but it meant F all because they were clearly in on the take. Lesson learned, if pretty girls ask you to play a game, it's for nefarious reasons. Yeah, a machete is a pretty good point to take your losses and call things off, I feel. Honestly, I wonder what would have happened if you had stayed longer and there was more money involved. When I was 17, I met with a 23-year-old guy for a mall date. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I'd just gotten out of a horrible relationship and was trying to distract myself. We had dinner, and when the waiter brought the check, the guy told me he had forgotten his wallet in his car and that if I went with him, he could grab it. I told him it was fine and paid for the meal myself. We went into a couple of shops, but he kept asking me questions about my ex-boyfriend and also mentioned that he had been in jail but wouldn't tell me what for, and I was nervous. Then things came to a head when he kept saying, "Hey, just come to my car for a second, please. Let's listen to music," and kept getting increasingly anxious every time I declined. I was so scared. I immediately pretended to have a period emergency just so I could get out of there quickly, and luckily I'd parked in a different lot than he did. I still have no idea what his intentions were, but man, that was terrifying. As a young teenager, maybe 13 years old, I was camping in the backcountry during a summer camp in the Midwest US. Second to last night of the trip, we started seeing mammatus clouds and the sky turned green, but no immediate rain or hail. Being the good Midwestern kids we were, we knew the signs and found a semi-solid shelter before the storm hit. When we got out of the backcountry, we found that 3 major tornadoes had touched down and gotten as close as half a kilometer to our original campsite. As a New Yorker, I would have just stared at the pretty sky and probably died.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Some guy in my class. I'm trying not to sound non-inclusive here, but he was a special case. Kept talking about his effed up life. Some things he had done that made people fear him because he was unpredictable included bringing a knife to class, placing it casually on the desk, one of those big Rambo knives. There was another girl in the class who was one of those mouthy types. She talked about him and he responded by getting her in a chokehold and threatening her. Then finally smashing a pint glass over his head for no apparent reason other than to show that he could. He ended up in hospital with those cuts. Everyone stayed the F away from him, but that only added to his paranoia. Everyone graduated and I stayed in that city for a bit. Bumped into him by accident in my gym. He told me I was one of the few who he didn't want to shank. I was just minding my own business, but he took it as a sign of friendship and wanted to follow me back to my apartment to hang out. I told him I was going to work after the gym, never went back to that gym ever again. I was walking back to my house from my ex's place very early in the morning when I saw this little girl with a backpack running for her life from 2 big street dogs. At that moment, I didn't think and ran towards the dogs and missed a kick. The 2 dogs came after me, biting my legs and arm. They were out of control and these were like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop them from biting me. The little girl kept running until I didn't see her anymore. It was just me and the dogs attacking me. I tried to climb a fence to get inside a house, but I couldn't when a taxi driver stopped and went out of the car with a short stick and he tried to scare them off, giving me a chance to run, and without thinking I got inside his car. The guy just ran a couple of times around the car with the dogs behind him until he got in and drove really fast. He took me to the hospital where I got a lot of stitches on my legs, arms, and hands. That guy is my hero. Every now and then I go to his taxi shop and give them sandwiches or something. We never knew what happened to those dogs. I was driving in the dead of winter in Iowa. I saw this guy fishtailing all over behind me and going faster. Eventually, he comes up on my rear and I try to move over to let him speed through. My gut feeling was right. I just acted too late. He lost his traction as he was passing me and hit me and made me spin out, and I flew into a snowplow. I was waiting for the next bus in a bus station at 2 a.m. in Minneapolis. A security guard outside told me to stay within the camera zone. I sat down and waited, all alone except for a couple of weirdos in another part of the station. Suddenly, a guy comes in and walks up to me. He's dressed in a black hoodie, wearing a skeleton mask, and now standing right in front of me. Didn't say a word, just stood there and looked at me. When he started to walk away, I bolted out of there, ran down the street, and luckily found a 24/7 Walgreens. I was the only white guy working at a Hispanic restaurant, and I don't speak Spanish, that's part of it. One night after work, I got invited to drink at one of their houses. All is good, we're drinking, and I even danced a bit. Then after going outside to the back patio to smoke a cigarette, I came back inside, and the guy whose house I was at had a knife and was yelling at these 3 co-workers of mine, blocking the front door, yelling in Spanish that no one is leaving. I knew that much Spanish at least. A bar patron who knew me grabbed me and pleaded to the guy to just let me and him out since we had no part in it. The homeowner lets us both out. I asked the bar patron what the frick was that when we're outside since I can't speak Spanish, and he says the guy thinks my 3 co-workers are sleeping with his wife and he's probably about to kill them. I got in my car and got the F out of there. I was in Paris with my family on holiday. We were walking down the Champs-Élysées when we noticed the road was suddenly lined either side with riot police. We quickly got off the road behind the line of police and ducked into some showroom while some protesters of some kind then had a mini riot with the police. I don't remember much as my parents probably tried to keep me away from the windows so that I wouldn't be able to see or even end up in any sort of danger. I ripped my pants while bowling. Incidentally, I was also going commando and the meats and cheeses were fully exposed. I bowled a frame or two before noticing as well. It was a second date. You know, I feel like we have to congratulate the author of this story for fitting such a tremendous amount of disaster into such a short story. Every segment made it so much worse, and it truly is an achievement in the field of human failure. Well done, and yes, you did have to run and probably move town after that humiliation. One time, I was driving through Kansas in the middle of the night with my girlfriend on a road trip. Summer of 2017, I think. We had issues with the car breaking down in Nebraska, and we were sputtering along until we reached Colby, Kansas, and waited for night so the roads were less busy. As we were driving along, not Highway 70 but just south to stay off the highways, a semi caught up to us. Our car didn't want to go past 50 or 60 miles per hour, and I didn't want to push it and break down. Needless to say, I was going too slow for this semi-truck. For about an entire hour, this guy was riding my butt, flashing his lights. Never honked his horn, though. I'd slow down and pull off to the side a little bit up to let him pass, but every time I did that, he'd slow down too and give me a ton of space. It was now about 2 or 3 a.m. We were in the middle of nowhere, coming up close to the border of Colorado. He's still contently riding my butt and turning his lights on and off again. We finally come across a gas station and pull over to a pump on the right side. A lot of people have suggested to me that the driver was trying to indicate that maybe a light was out on my car or something. Trust me, this was the first thing I checked at the gas station when I got out of the car. The only thing wrong with my car was its inability to accelerate past 50 miles per hour without sputtering. Also, I was driving at night because the heat was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we needed a break from driving through Nebraska, and there's less traffic to worry about at night. We didn't get the car fixed right away because we needed to get a gig in southern Colorado that weekend, which made us enough money to fix the car. Yep, we were living out of the car and some tents, and we spent a ton of time driving through the nights or sleeping in random places in the middle of nowhere. And I can't emphasize how literally I mean the middle of nowhere. It was flat deserts forever in all directions. It's an empty shell gas station that's closed and dark as frick. We were hoping that the truck would just pass us and we pretended to pump gas. This frickin' truck slows all the way and stops right there on the road next to us. He proceeded to back his truck up enough to pull into the gas station behind us, perpendicular to our car. I started losing my crap and looking around. I'm standing outside of my car and my girlfriend is screaming for me to get back in the car. This guy gets out of the semi and walks directly towards us. He's only about 50 yards away when I notice a small brown pickup truck sitting on the backside of the shell, eerily placed, and I notice there's someone in it. I run towards him, and as I get closer I realize there's a police badge painted on the side of this brown pickup, and the man inside is actually an officer. I can only imagine what this guy on late night duty was thinking when I was running up to him. He rolls the window down with a confused look on his face. My girlfriend is screaming at me in panic as this guy gets within 10 yards of the car, while I'm spitting about 50 words out of my mouth in about 2 seconds explaining our situation. The officer doesn't say a word and just drives around our car. The guy notices and does an immediate U-turn back towards his truck as the officer is yelling at him to stop. I hop back into my car, look in the rearview mirror for a second to see the officer getting out to try to talk to this guy. I turn on the car, hit the gas, and drive into Colorado a few minutes later. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if that officer wasn't just sitting there that night. Whoever you are, man, bless your soul. I woke up one Friday in a hotel and the internet was down. I went to the lobby to see what was up and saw scenes of chaos on the TV. A crowd had started to gather to watch, including the hotel staff. One employee told me the government had shut down the internet to test it. The scenes on the TV were of violent protests beginning all over Egypt as people made their first push to occupy Tahrir Square. It was January 25, 2011, and I was in Benghazi, Libya, without my US passport. Needless to say, I spent my energy over the next few days trying to get out of the country. I was able to leave, but many of the people I was working with weren't as lucky. The revolution started in Benghazi less than 2 weeks later. It was surreal watching Anderson Cooper broadcasting live from the hotel I'd just been staying in. My parents liked going to the backyard gatherings of friends, which were thinly veiled excuses just to get hammered. They dragged all of us kids along for some reason, but I never much cared for sitting around watching a bunch of adults get wasted. There was always something stupid that happened, and more often than not, it was violent. Now, you have to understand that these friends that they associated with were scum. Wannabe gangsters, drunks, and substance addicts, petty thieves, domestic criminals, and one ex-con who claimed that he'd helped kill the unspeakable act offenders in prison. Just all around the very picture of dregs of our modern society. The night in question had the full cast of lowlives freshly scraped from the bottom of the barrel and put into one backyard, and in hindsight, there's no way something wouldn't happen. It all started when one guy put his hands on his wife. The ex-con guy didn't take kindly to that and punched him out. This guy's buddies got up to square off, and so did the ex-con's buddies. It quickly devolved into yelling and exchanged blows until one of the guys who lived next door came out with a frickin' chainsaw. So I was inside the house on the property and I heard people yelling, screaming, and a pregnant woman who was crying ran in with some kids. I sat there bewildered until my parents ran in, both seemingly almost sober from the adrenaline, and essentially told my brothers and I, "We need to go now." So we stayed at my cousin's house close by because my parents were still really in no condition to drive, and to this day I refuse to go to any of those crappy little gatherings. What went down when you dialed numbers written on bathroom stalls? I once added someone on Snapchat who'd spray-painted their name on top of a mountain I was hiking, and they replied to my message with, "Who the frick is this?" Like I was the jerk. Never dialed one myself, but I answered a call one day from an unrecognized number. He was in a bathroom stall at Arby's that read, "For a long philosophical conversation followed closely by rough bedroom activities, and then my phone number." Now, I didn't write it, but I guess word gets around. I found a business card in a phone booth printed cryptically with, "If you don't call, you'll never know," and a phone number. Since I had time left on the phone card, I called, and now I know. It was a pseudo-religious self-help cult trying to recruit people to seminars at their ranch in like New Mexico somewhere, with promises of finding a new spiritual family. No thanks. The last thing I need is more family. There was a guy in my group of friends that annoyed the crap out of me. I made a series of "free yard work by the mentally challenged" signs and hung them up in Costco bathrooms numerous times for about 5 summers in a row. He'd always complain of these stupid people calling him thinking he was a special needs person who liked to do yard work for free. I never did tell him it was me who put those signs there. I dialed a number from my college bathroom stalls that said, "Free down under kiss." I thought it was going to be the police department or something asinine, but I wanted to do it anyway because you never know, and it was a number for vector marketing. Fah! I saw a number scratched on a table at a bar that said something like, "Call Mike, he's been really mean," sad face. So I sent Mike a text telling him to be nicer, and in response he sent me back several angry, "Who the hell is this?" texts over the next few days. He is really mean. Yeah, I think Mike needs a few more unsolicited messages to help fix his attitude. That's needlessly aggressive of him. Good on that person for scratching his number on the table and helping him get the treatment he needs. I was at a restaurant and they had the option to give $1 to charity and to put your name on this piece of paper that we posted on our wall. While waiting in the lobby for a friend, I saw that one had a name and a phone number with "Call me" under it. I figured, why the hell not? A girl answers and I ask if it's this person, and she says yes. I explain I'm in the lobby of the restaurant and her name is on the wall with her phone number. She doesn't believe me despite my best efforts to convince her I don't know who she is. Eventually, she asks me to walk out the front door of the restaurant, to which I obliged, and she says, "Oh, holy crap." Meanwhile, I'm standing in the parking lot trying to figure out who the heck is looking at me. She asked me to take the paper down and thanked me. Apparently, one of her co-workers told her that he did it and she didn't believe him. They worked in the area and frequented the restaurant. In high school, I messaged one that was on the backseat of a bus that was going through a town that was a 30-minute drive from my town. I texted, "Who is this? Your number is on the backseat of this bus." They replied, "Greg." I told my classmate about it a week later since his name was also Greg. Sure enough, he holds out his phone with the text message from me on the screen. About 10 years ago, someone wrote, "Call this number for a good time on the sidewalk." So I saved the number for crap talking, thinking I'd call the number and at least let them know how I got it, but I never did. Just kept the number saved as triple question mark. Well, the other day I was on Snapchat and I saw triple question mark pop up in the suggested friends or whatever, so I added her and she added me back. She's a babe and I have no idea what to say to her, but I want to tell her how I got the number and not seem too weird. I found a number on the bathroom stall in a bar. When you need a friend, when something great happens and you have no one to tell, when you want to vent, when you want to be spontaneous, when you need help getting home from a drunken stupor, call me. Rest in peace, Ryan. I cried and called to tell her what a great message it was, and we both cried and talked for a few hours. I know a guy that called a number written on a $5 bill. He figured she must be a quality girl because it was a 5 and not a single. She had a great voice on the phone, so they made a date. He played guitar in a popular local band, and there was a hip restaurant next to the club they were playing at, so they arranged to meet before the gig. He figured they'd have dinner, and then he'd impress the crap out of her with his playing. He was truly a fine guitarist. So he walked into the restaurant and looked for a girl in a pink dress. There was one, and she was enormous. So he slipped out before she saw him. So during the show, he sees the crowd part as the girl in the pink dress makes her way up to the front, where she glares at him during the entire set. Afterwards, she screamed at him for standing her up. He felt a little guilty but said he'd feel worse if he'd had dinner with her and then dropped her. After all of this, his warning was to not call numbers that you see on currency. Not in a bathroom stall, but someone had once written one of my male friends' numbers on a classroom bench. A girl called him, they talked and began dating. Eventually, a guy who had a crush on her beat my friend up, and that's how my friend lost his first girlfriend. When my friend and I were about 11, there was a public bathroom in the park where we had soccer practice, and outside that public bathroom was a payphone, and on that payphone was scrawled a number and above it the word S-E and you know the final letter. I don't recall ever paying for a call, so maybe it was a 1-800 number. I don't remember. It was a recording of a woman's voice. I remember only the beginning, but I can hear it crystal clear to this day. "You want to have fun? Yeah?" Then a bunch of feminine giggling. We'd hang up when the recording asked for a credit card number to continue the call. I think we were terrified our parents' credit cards would somehow get charged and we'd get caught. Kid logic. We're both straight females, but we still called that thing all the time. It was seriously the most risque thing I've ever done up to that point, and also probably for a long time afterwards, sadly. I was at the bus stop and I saw this text. "If you're in deep crap, call this number." I called the number because I had like 30 minutes to bus. It was a small taxi company. I told him to come pick me up. He saved me like 25 minutes of waiting. The guy was cool and I even gave him a solid tip. I texted one of these numbers a picture of a cucumber because that's what the note said to do, and they sent me cabbage. I was playing Jenga at a local bar with some friends. All the blocks had people's numbers on it, so we made a rule that you had to text any number you pulled out. The first person I texted sent me a picture of a pile of coffee beans labeled, "Find the Kanye." There was a tiny Kanye face on a bean in the bottom left corner. I asked for Jenny and instead got a very irate cussing out from a woman with a southern drawl. I never called it, but I was in this English pub in Tokyo and the walls were pretty typical of an English pub. West Ham forever, Sarah is a slag, and so on. Then one said, "Is anyone interested in joining our baseball team every Sunday at 11 a.m. with his phone number?" He must have thought it was an actual message board. Bless. Kind of unrelated, but I took a picture of my Snap code, basically like a QR code for Snapchat accounts, using one of the display phones at Best Buy. I now have a random woman following me. An old-sounding woman answered when I called the number, offered the best B followed immediately by a J in town. I asked her how much. They told me $5. I asked her if it was blueberry or blackberry jam. She called me an idiot. "Boysenberry jam, idiot. Those other ones are out of season." I got me a boysenberry jam from that woman, if you know what I mean. I used to call the numbers and inform the recipient of where there were not such nice things written with their name and number. They'd always ask what it said, and I'd always reply that I wasn't sure they wanted to know, but they'd insist. I'd tell them verbatim in my radio announcer voice and listen to the shock emanate from the cell phone. They'd always ask me to mark it out, but I'd tell them that I didn't have a pen or Sharpie. I found my sister's number once and couldn't stop laughing. I'm sorry, but if you call your sister and tell her that, there's no way she wouldn't think that you hadn't written it there. I think in that one specific instance, you should have gotten a Sharpie and crossed it out. Best experience. Became regular F-buddies with this guy. I'm also a guy, by the way. He was a bike enthusiast, and we went biking several weekends. But my worst experience, I went to meet this other guy, after some discussions and deciding whose eggplant would go into whose cornhole, and the guy had lied about his stats. I'm talking about being a real chubber, beer belly, out to 10 months pregnancy level. Well, I'm here anyway, all revved up, secretly grit my teeth and say, let's do it. He says he wants to do it without protection. He claims to be a virgin and needs his cherry popped. Seriously, guy, your number is on the wall of a mall bathroom, and you want me to believe that you're a virgin? He got offended at my nasty insinuations, told me to go F myself, and to lose my number. I ain't gonna want to see your, and he gave me a racial slur for brown people, face ever again, and you should go back to your own country where you belong and do unspeakable things to goats. When I told him we have no goats in Toronto, the weather is much too cold for them, he got even more mad. Fun times. I dialed up a number scratched on a horse feed shed storage door out in Loudoun County, Virginia, and Robert Duvall answered. He cautioned me not to use the number again unless I could deliver him 2 to 55 pounds of horse and mule feed. I actually met my best friend in middle school ringing one of those numbers. Huh. I had the best S and F of my life as the text had advertised. The guy was homeless, though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It was written on a piece of paper way back around 10 years ago. It said, call this number if you're struggling with life. I was 13, so I called the number. We had never met, but he had a really sweet voice, and we talked for about an hour. Gave me great advice about how the world can be cruel to gays like me, but that the future will get better. We never communicated after that. If I could meet that guy to thank him, even for a second, I would. Thank you, Mr. Target. That's what he wanted to be called, by the way. I saw the number read Hunger Games Hotline, so I took a picture of it in case I ever wanted to call it. A year later, I was on a school field trip coming back from DC when I tell my friend we should call this one number. He says yes, we dial it, and we hear robots doing the deed. When I was younger, someone wrote, for a good time, call, and my number on the playground slide. People would call a couple of times a week, laugh, and then hang up. I started to get annoyed, so I went to the playground to cover it up. Someone saw me doing it and called the cops, saying I was vandalizing the playground. I had to explain to the cop that I was just removing my number so people would stop calling me. Okay, so it wasn't a bathroom stall, but a hilarious story. Back a long time ago, Paris Hilton had her T-Mobile sidekick hacked, and all of her contacts' numbers leaked online. I was contracting some 15 or 16-year-old kid to do a website for me at the time. About 4 or 5 hours before the list went public, this guy building my site hits me up on AIM. Yeah, I'm that old. And he's like, my buddy just did some crazy hack, he got all these celebrities' numbers. Bullcrap, I said, because at the time this was unheard of. He sends me a text file of about 150 names and numbers. The first one that stuck out to me that I knew who they were was Fred Durst. I rang him up, froze, and then said, yes, is this Mr. Durst? Yeah, who is this? I truthfully explained the exact scenario, and my morbid skepticism led me to dial him up. He said something about him going to have to turn his phone off now and actually thanked me for giving him a heads up. After that, I waited a few hours and picked a number at random, someone I didn't recognize or know. Wrong idea. She picked up the phone and said my number was now logged into her phone and the FBI were on the case. Whatever. She finished by telling me that she hoped I died. At that moment, I knew the list had been public. I logged into some MIRC chats and it was story after story of interactions. I don't like his music, but Fred Durst seems like a cool cat, and I like to think I gave him a heads up before the crap hit the fan. Overall, teenagers do dumb crap. I went outside after watching a movie at the theater and someone had written their number in the snow that had collected on the back of my car. I texted it and it was just a random guy who went to my school. Never met him, but he saw the decal from my university and his buddies had dared him to leave his number there. The message said, for the best B, again immediately followed by the letter J, the person that answered said that meant best blinging jewels. Well played, K Jewelers. One of my best friends in college. It was our freshman year and somebody had written a number in the girls' bathroom in our dorm. Half drunk, we pressured her to text the number, and to our surprise, she got a reply. It was another student. They actually ended up talking for quite some time and met like a month later. They've been dating for 5 years now. I went to a gig and everyone who frequented this venue would write on the wall while queuing. So me, being drunk already, decided I'd ring one because it said something amusing. Guy answers and I told him where I am and that I was bored, so I rang this number off the wall. We had a conversation about who he saw and who I was seeing that night, and due to me being drunk, I sang a song by the band he went to see down the phone to him. Funniest queue bonding moment so far. Me and a few friends wrote one of our friends' numbers in the Portaloo or drop toilet at Glastonbury Festival about 6 years ago. Every summer around festival season, he'll receive a few calls from people asking if the guy wanting fun stuff in the butt is still available, and if so, where does he want to meet. His girlfriend hates us almost as much as he does. When I was in 7th grade, pubescent and virginal, my sister, in the 9th grade, informed me that my name and number were written on the stall in the girls' locker room. Turns out, not only was I hot, I was good in bed, available for a good time and a wild lay. This was music to my ears and my raging hormones. I really wanted to do the deed with another human being. My friends did as well, but they were unfortunate, unrepresented suckers. I just sat back and waited for the calls to come in. I didn't stray far from the house, even though I'd trained my ear to distinguish our ringer. I could hear the phone from 3 states over. Nobody called interested in sampling my raw animal prowess. 4 years later, in the summer between 11th and 12th grade, I was at an all-night diner with some friends of mine, dining with my sister and her friends, because college chicks, am I right? One of her friends came out of the bathroom talking about some graffiti, and I remembered. I mentioned to my sister that I'd waited for the phone to ring for weeks, and it was a karate chop to my ego. She then informed me that she had changed the 3s to 8s, while laughing with her friends. At me. Hot and good in bed me. I know that your sister seems mean, but as most of those calls were either going to be pranks or people you probably shouldn't be taking a risk on in the 7th grade, I honestly think she did you a solid, and she doomed some other person to a bunch of weird calls. Mine wasn't a bathroom stall, but just a couple of weeks ago, I met a girl from writing her number in Roman numerals on a school desk, and just 2 days ago, we ended up going out together. School bathroom with a phone number in Sharpie. Written above it, it said, "Sucks eggplants for free." I started typing it in to text, but I realized it was my own phone number. High school kids are brutal. Called the number, went on a date, it was successful. Would recommend 10 out of 10. One time I found a number that said, "For an adequate time, call this number." So I called it, and it was adequate. As crazy as it sounds, I texted a number off the bathroom stall in a movie theater in Texas when I was visiting family. I made some crappy joke and then told them I got their number off a wall. Somehow it turned into a full-on conversation, and that was how I met the first love of my life. We were together for over a year, and it's just crazy to think it all transpired because I texted a number off a bathroom stall. That was about 6 years ago, and I haven't seen or talked to Kaylee in years, but it's still a pretty cool story to tell people. The number was on a bench at my local canal. Me and the wife were walking the dogs, and someone had written in very childish writing, "For a good time, text this number." So for a laugh, I did, and the resulting conversation was very strange. The person started by asking for pictures of me and asking if I wanted undressed photos of them. After politely declining, I said, "I don't think my wife would be happy with that." They said, "Don't worry, your wife can join in." Through this time, due to the writing, I presumed that the number was written by a bunch of kids because of the style. I also thought it was probably just some kids messing around with me. My wife said it's probably some local gay guy actually looking for fun. I never believed that, though. This person was very persistent and texted me at least 4 times a day for nearly a week straight, with me constantly ignoring them. Fast forward about a month, I used the local toilets near the canal. These toilets are famous for gay hookups at night as well. There's metal installed in the stalls and big blocks of woods where you'd normally find, special holes for people. Whilst taking a whiz, I see a number written on the stall. I check it against the number from the texts, and yep, my wife was right all along. On the stalls it said, "For the best gay down-under kiss you'll ever receive, text me." I texted the number while I was drunk. Usually sober, I wouldn't. The same day, a woman called the police and reported me for stalking, even though I only texted her saying hi and telling her that her number was on the bathroom wall. So, I have a question. Does the story count if the phone number was sharpied on the side of the eggplant that came through the bathroom wall? Before my senior year of high school, I was a camp counselor at a week-long camp in the Pocono area. There was a number in the craft cabin, and I texted it. The guy was confused about it for a second and then laughed when he remembered writing it. And then I accidentally mentioned that it was a girls' camp, and he hit on me and I blocked him. A friend of mine called a number carved into a beam in line for a roller coaster. He dialed it up for a good time and asked if he could have a good time. The person who wrote the number was a teenager, and the person who picked up the phone was this teen's grandmother. The look on my friend's face was priceless. My family was out hiking and we found a number carved into the wooden guardrail. My sister called it and pretended to be a forest agent, probably not the same name for them. She told the girl that the state was pressing charges against her for destruction of public property. The girl started crying, my sister started laughing, and hung up the phone. My cousin met her boyfriend of 3 years by calling a number on a bathroom wall. It said something like, "For a good time, call this number." She texted out of curiosity. Apparently one of his friends had put his name and number down there just to mess with him. He usually had guys sending him D-pics and stuff and was considering changing his number. They texted back and forth over 6 months until they finally met. They now live together and seem happy. If they ever end up getting married and having kids, they'll have quite a story to tell about how they met. When I was in university, I messaged a number on the wall of a bathroom stall. A guy and his friend both came and left. It was exhilarating. Got tested immediately afterwards and never did it again, but it was the hottest bedroom fun time I've ever had. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.